Today, I look at the BC staff directory, and under the last names beginning just with the letter A alone, we have over 20 Chicano Latinos listed. We have come a long way, but you're here today because we still have a long ways to go. And today, it's still not easy being Chicano. Again, I want to thank Professors Rosales, Barajas, for putting this together. I think you're going to have an exciting conference today. You have some exciting presenters. And I'd like to give the floor over to Professor Barajas for his presentation.
Thank you so much, Corny, for those welcoming words. One thing I forgot to do to begin the conference, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm not accustomed to talking about myself. If you get to know me personally, that's one of the things I don't really like to do is talk about myself. But that was rude of me. My name's Octavio Barajas. I'm an adjunct professor in history. I teach Chicano history and also Latin American history. And I've been working on putting this conference together with many other people. But thank you, Corny. Corny and I also crossed paths here when I was a student. I was also a student here at Bakersfield College some time ago. And when Corny at the time was director of the Chicano Cultural Center. And we're part of that group of mechudos at the time who were actually were at the forefront speaking with the administration at the time about the closure of the Chicano Cultural Center. And there's other mechudos here in the house today too. Raise your hand for mechudos of my generation. Oh, so there's some of us here. And so I just want to thank you, Corny, for those wonderful words. And it was a great address to understand the complexities of Chicano identity. One thing that I mentioned today in class is that un Chicano no se nace, se hace. That's the opposite of the thinking of the Mexican proverb that is usually a Mexican is born, not made, right? And it's the logic is inverted there because there's a sense of social awareness, political consciousness that comes along with the identity marker of a Chicana, a Chicano, that's politicized. Con razón decía tu madre que éramos sí, muy extremistas. Y bueno, having touched a little bit about that, I wanted also to give a much due recognition and acknowledgement to Professor Rosa Garza. And so this is something that we would like to do. And here Corny's accompanying me with this recognition. So let me tell you a little bit about Professor Garza and why we are acknowledging her today. Education-wise, Professor Garza has a master's degree in history from Cal State Bakersfield, which was conferred in 1994 in the areas of U.S. history, Chicano history, Mexican history, and European history. She also has a bachelor's degree in history, San Jose State, in 1974, conferred with the minor coursework in anthropology, Associates of Art degree here from Bakersfield College in 1972. And also, on a personal note, Professor Garza is from this area. She was born in Wasco, California in 1952, grew up there until 1972, where she went away to San Jose State for her education. Her parents, farm workers, and the first in a family to attend college. And while at Bakersfield College, Professor Garza was a member of the United Mexican American Students, the precursor to MECHA, which was later established in 1972, which we have some co-founders with us here today as well. At San Jose State, Professor Garza was also a member of MECHA until she graduated with her BA in history. And on a personal experience here at Bakersfield College, Professor Garza is a tenure-track history instructor of Bakersfield College, and she's taught Chicano history, 30A, which is the early Chicano history portion, and also 30B, which is Chicano history from 1848 to the present. And she's been working here since 1994. and continues to work here to this day, offering different courses in Chicano history. And so we would like to acknowledge her not only for the contributions of instruction in Chicano history, but maintaining that legacy that was trailblazed by Jess Nieto in 1971, being the first professor who taught Chicano history, but this is a continuation of so many people who've had the opportunity to come and get an education through Professor Garza's instruction. And in addition to that, not only is that the contribution that Professor Garza has had on campus, but she also has been the advisor. Currently, Professor Livia Garcia is the advisor of MECHA. Until recently, Professor Garza was the advisor of MECHA for close to 2 decades.
23 years.
23 years. She was the advisor of MECHA when I was here. Many fond memories and much support. So we would like to acknowledge her and her contributions for not only for the instructional service of continuing the instruction of Chicano studies here at Bakersfield College throughout those years, but also in the realm of student services, Chicano student services, by providing very important fundamental support to our students in the area of MECHA, which is also a major pillar that was trailblazed by Jess Nieto. And so, having said that, I would like to call Rosa Garza to please receive this award, the Bakersfield College, the Jess G. Nieto Memorial Conference Award, presented to Rosa Garza, Award for Excellence in Instruction in Chicano History. Corny Rodriguez, Cornelio, Dean of Instruction, and Dr. Sonia Christensen, the president of our wonderful college. That's it.
I'm in the middle.
Rose in the middle with arms on the side.
Turn your paper around, your plaque.
You want to take the
Access facing.
one.
There you go.
Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
All right. So now this brings us to our first panel, and I would like to call all of our panelists to have a seat, please, at these tables that we have before us. This would be Desi, Emmanuel, Leon, Selene, Louis, and Deborah Vito.
And Dwayne.
And Dwayne Goff, por favor. We have a chair on this side. Yeah. So just allow me a moment to introduce our panelists. And this panel is titled MECHA de BC, or MECHA de Bakersfield College. And MECHA is an acronym that stands for Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. So the Chicano student movement of Aztlán, which is, I mean, how closer can you get to approximating what the Chicano movement represents in that? And so this is a local chapter of an organization established in the late 60s that came out, the Chicano movement. And so MECHA is very critical for having initiated the Plan de Santa Barbara in 1969 in UC Santa Barbara. And so there they laid down the groundwork, that conference where there was hundreds of mechistas, of different peoples at different universities, who are articulating the coursework, a curriculum, to how to implement a Chicano studies curriculum in universities throughout the Southwest. So MECHA has played a fundamental role in the development of a Chicano studies curriculum since then. And here locally, we have members of the current MECHA chapter of today. We have the president, Desi Van Manos, who will be graduating this May, and her major is communications and she looks forward to continuing her studies in religious studies as she moves on with her education. And she also is a returning student who joined Mecha in 2015, and standing up against social issues that affected her community, she found herself more involved than ever as she was soon elected Mecha president. Since then, she has helped increase Mecha's presence among BC by bringing Mecha up to the Tier 1 system, along with receiving multiple nominations for Leading Organization Award, awarded by BC every year. And also to add with that, Desi Van Manos is also the student body president of this year. So, and we also have Emmanuel Limaco, and Emmanuel Limaco is an ICC representative of our current Mecha chapter. He is 33 years of age, of African and Peruvian descent, of a single immigrant mother from Peru. He is majoring in physics, math, and communication, and liberal arts. Rather ambitious. Very good, very good. Planning on transferring to UC as an engineering undergrad with the personal goal of becoming an architectural engineer and building the largest homeless center in the world is his ambition. So his goals are his main motivation, but he's also motivated by his experiences in prison and being a voice for those who struggle with incarceration, immigration issues, injustices, homelessness, and poverty. And so Emmanuel is a face that you'll see at most public manifestations here in town. You know, so he usually comes back into our campus really hoarse, having lost his voice from shouting at all these manifestations. Next, we have two cohort members from my generation that would like to introduce Selene Magaña, and who is has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, a Master of Science in Counseling, and Cal State Bakersfield, and was also a board member of Heritage of America, Jess Nieto's educational foundation, and former member of Jess's Chicano, Latino Scholastic, and Leadership Academy. Help me welcome Selene también. And we also have BC alumni, Chicano Cultural Center advocate, Leon Arellano, who advocated under Jess Nieto's leadership to prevent the closure of Bakersfield College's Chicano Cultural Center. He holds a bachelor's in history and also Chicano studies from UC Davis. He is a Juris Doctoral candidate for the People's College of Law Employment. His focus is, his employment is litigation investigator for the Los Angeles Dependency Lawyer. And next to welcome our founders, our co-founders of Mecha, who co-founded Mecha here in 1972. And we have co-founder Dwayne Golf, to my right. Who I recall Jess telling me that Dwayne is a political machine when it came to activism. And he has a lot of, I'm sure, a lot of experiences to share about his activism while at BC.
And we miss him.
And we miss him. We definitely do. And we also have another co-founder, Luis Cruz Beltran. Luis Cruz Beltran, I recall Jess Nieto telling me that he was one of the first people on our campus that self-identified and embraced the Chicano identity here at Bakersfield College. Both co-founder of our Mecha chapter, but also co-founder of the Brown Berets chapter here in Bakersfield. And Louis is also a very talented musician who was influenced by the Afro-Cuban rhythms of those who participated in the Chicano movement in those days. And he will also be playing at the Smithsonian Mall on April 29th in the Ella Fitzgerald Jazz Festival for National Jazz Day. And later that evening, he will also play at an international iconic jazz venue where all the who's who of jazz have played, which is the Blues Alley. So help me welcome also Luis Cruz. And last and certainly not least, Deborah Viro Rivera, de cariño, también le digo mi madre. mi madre espiritual aquí del movimiento Chicano de Aztlán. Y Deborah is also co-founder of our chapter of Mecha and was one of the first Chicana student body presidents here at Bakersfield College. And she's also an advocate of the Our Lady of Guadalupe Church here in town. So you will see her to this day carrying out a lot of the activities and providing the leadership for the local church of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Without further ado, I would like to, for the first, our current members to speak about Mecha, the contributions and the significance of Mecha. And then from there, we'll carry forth with the next two members of 2002. And then we'll close with our co-founders and who will speak on that significance of the activity of BC Mecha. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emmanuel Limacos. I am a current member of Mecha, also the current internal representative for our organization. So some of the things that we have done in the past, in recent years, we've tackled a lot of the immigration issues, gotten involved with other organizations in the Bakersfield community that deal with, that get involved politically and take a political standpoint on immigration and social justice issues. We've successfully co-sponsored several events here on campus. We have partnered with other organizations such as one called CIJA in order to put on a anti-deportation event at the local detention center here in town. And wherever there are social injustices happening in our city, I've kind of been one of several that have been present. We have also partnered with several individuals such as Emilio Huerta to try to get his candidacy on the ball, which we were very sad when he decided to pull out. But we get involved not only here on campus but also in the community, and we're going to continue to do so.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jess Van Manos, and as you heard before, I joined Mecha in 2015 when I decided to return to college and finish what I had started a while back. And upon my return, my first intention was just to academically achieve and complete everything that I needed to complete in order to obtain my AA. I had no idea that I was going to become so involved, not only on campus, but within organizations itself. So during my first semester, I started looking into groups into which, I could be more involved here on campus. And I heard of Mecha. And at first, you hear the negatives of everything, no matter what it is. And even if it pertains to your people, you hear the negative. And I think that's what drove me closer to seeing exactly what is Mecha about. Because when I heard the negative, remarks about Mecha and just how people perceive the Mecha as, people that believe in anarchy, if you will, people that just do what they want, they don't, follow the rules, they do their own thing. I looked into it and I thought, no, that's not what Mecha is about. Mecha is a movement. Mecha is, built upon the foundation of fighting for, that which is right, not only for your people, but for your brothers and sisters. So when I looked into it, I thought, you know what, this is for me. This is where I wanna get, myself involved in. So I joined Mecha, and I was just a member. When I saw what Mecha was doing here on campus, I thought, hey, you know what? Perfect, because I'm that type of person. When I see that, things aren't equally spread among everybody that's involved, I'm the type of person that will speak up. I'm the type of person that will fight for equality for everyone. So I thought, this is where I'm going to stay. I had no idea that eventually I would become the president of Mecha, which I'm thankful for because it has opened many, many opportunities, not only, to venture off and see what else I can do within the community as well, but opportunities of meeting people whose stories that I never knew I could hear and relate to. And that's what inspired me to move forward, especially here on campus, and be elected as the president of the student body. To which I bring that mentality that I have with Mecha to the students. Because Mecha works the same way as, what I do within the student government. And that is to represent the students. That is to represent those voices that cannot be heard for whatever reason it is. And I learned a lot about that aspect in MECHA. There's a lot of situations in which our people are suffering that many, for whatever reason it may be, cannot speak up. They can't get out there and fight. And that's what we're here for. We're here to stand up for those voices that aren't recognized. So I took it upon myself to become more and more involved and not only bring up MECHA here on campus, which you heard earlier, that now we're Tier 1, which in student organizations here on campus, they place the organizations based off of their activity and how active they are here on campus in certain, slots. There's a Tier 1, there's a Tier 2, and there's a Tier 3. Tier 1 being the most active. So not only did we become the most active on campus, but our name is now something that you're pretty much familiar with when you're walking around BC. And that honestly is an amazing feeling because of the fact that MECHA does so much, but yet there have been numerous years in which you say the name MECHA and nobody knows what you're talking about. But yet now you say MECHA and everybody just, oh yeah, MECHA, yeah, we know. And that's what we strive for, the more and more that we get out there and do things, because now we're in the community. We're bringing that representation from the campus into Bakersfield. And as Emmanuel stated before, we've gone out to events and collaborated with other organizations and to fight against social injustices that are not only, oppressing our people, but oppressing others that can relate to our people, because in the end, it's about fighting for everyone. Everyone that's suffering, regardless of their culture, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their background. And that is one aspect of MECHA that I took upon myself to spread among the members of the past few years was, yes, we are Chicano, yes, we fight for our people, but when somebody that is not Chicano, somebody that is not of, Latino descent comes to our doors and says, hey, can I join MECHA? Because of course, that question comes up, I'm not Chicano, can I be here? Well, of course, because we've evolved to not only fight for our people, but fight for those who suffer with us. So hopefully, in the near future, as you heard before as well, I will be walking the stage pretty soon and I won't be here. But yet, I hope that whoever follows in my footsteps and, takes the reins as president will see the main goal that we had among our people, which was to just get out there and be that voice for those who can't speak up. So thank you.
Well, hi guys, my name is Selena Magaña, and I'm very honored to be here today because I want to talk about a man that I love today, a man that really influenced me in my education and in my life. I'd like to start by saying that back in 2001, I was the first in my family to ever graduate from high school. And I was the first one to consider to go to higher education, and I told my mother, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to go to college and I'm going to complete it. I had a lot of obstacles in my life, but I said that's not going to prevent me to accomplish my ultimate goal of getting my bachelor's degree. Who knows? A master's, a PhD, who knows? I joined MECHA because I felt lost when I first came to BC. I didn't know anybody. A lot of my friends had gone to other schools, different schedules. I joined MECHA because why? I wanted to find a group of friends, a group that would welcome me, perhaps that knew the struggle, knew what I was going through, find support. Because at that point in my life, I was considered at risk of dropping out. Because if I didn't meet the right people, I might have just dropped out because of money issues, because not feeling like I belong in this college. It's true. Sometimes what we do is we look for that Spanish name of a professor to try to, hey, this is Ms. Garza. I'm signing up with Ms. Garza. I wanted to know what MECHA did for me is also open the doors to networking with not only meeting professors, meeting mentors, counselors, future leaders like Octavio, like Leon, and a lot of us here today. What MECHA gave me? the feeling that I belong here, and I had the right to be here, and I had the right to be successful and accomplish my goal. I did graduate in 2004. Before that, a few years back, I met one truly amazing man. That was Jess Nieto. I recall being by the library, and we were gathering because they had closed the center, the Chicano Culture Center, during the summer when nobody was here to stop them. Who shows up? A bunch of students, a lot of mechudos. We're angry, we're passionate, and there goes Jess. Who is that guy? I said. Oh, he was one of the founders of the Chicano Culture Center. Oh, and he started speaking, and I listened. I did not know the impact that man was going to have in my life, and that's why I'm here today, because I love him. Throughout the years, we became very good friends. Every graduation, every obstacle, he was there. How can I help you? How can I guide you? Eventually, after I graduated, he welcomed me at Heritage of America because he wanted to introduce me and expose me to a lot of things that goes on in the community. And I think he wanted to make me a leader, because I am a leader. We all are leaders. We just need a little push. We need to be molded. We need the assistance of a lot of you professors that have been very beneficial and influential in our life. So through Heritage of America, I was able to help those people that were losing their homes at that time, because a lot of people were going through foreclosure. This is where he brought me in, and let's help these people the best way we can. At Heritage of America, we also help people with immigration issues. Whenever there was anything about immigration, about politics, a lot of people came to Heritage of America and said, Jess, what can we do? Guide us, guide me in the right direction, help me. I had a lot of people come in and talk to Jess, and Jess, there's one thing that Jess always did. He welcomed you with a hug, doesn't it? And he meant it. That man welcomed you, and if he couldn't help you, he would try to find somebody that would help you. Eventually, he kind of took on the model from Mecha, and then he did his own academy. It was called the Chicano Latino Scholastic and Leadership Academy. What he did is he identified some students, some college students. He had them come in. He had us learn so much history. He had to understand. He was our professor. The first time I took a class from this man, and he wanted to make sure that we understood where we were coming from, how we've had struggled, what are the struggles of today, and what we can accomplish. But he said, you have to get an education. You can't just be out there. You have to get an education. That's what's going to open a lot of those doors. So I want some bachelors, I want some masters, I want some degrees, and I want to get you guys ready to take over and take on all this struggles that we're going to continue to face. We were made mentors of younger students, but we also were paired with professionals in our community. Then again, networking, the feeling of belonging. You struggle, we help you, because we want you to get those degrees. Jess was there every step of the way for a lot of us. I find myself very lucky that I found a friend in Jess. I found a mentor, a professor, but he became my family. We don't choose our relatives, but we choose our family, we choose our friends. I did not know that that guy speaking outside the library back in 2002, 2003, I didn't know that this man was going to be like a father figure to me. So when I lost that man, I lost a lot. And I'm here to say thank you, Jess, because he was that kind of professor that he meant everything that he said when he said, if I need to bring you home and shelter you to keep you in school, to keep you safe, I will do that. So I live with his wife and him, and I'm very lucky that he allowed me to be with his family, and he allowed me to become family. And look at us, all of us here gathered today. He would always say, he's always doing travesuras here and there. I'm always doing travesuras. And what is he doing today? Look at us. This is one of his travesuras. He brought us, all of us here together. And I'm thanking you all for being here today to honor this man and for talking about Mecha. And thank you for your time. And my part of my talk is basically to tell you what amazing man he was. And all those things that I was able to tell him when he was alive. And thank you very much for your time.
Well, my name's Leon Arellano. I originally grew up in Boa Heights in East LA. I still live there today. I just drove there from work. And I didn't become a part of the Bakersfield College community and family until my adult life. It wasn't until I graduated high school when I was 18. Growing up in the neighborhood, growing up in the barrio, was rough, you know? And when I was growing up in the 90s in East LA, it was either you were banging or you were in sports. That was pretty much the only option that you had. I come from a family of 9. I've lost sisters, I've lost a brother to the streets, to drug violence, to gangs themselves. So when I discovered Chicano studies in my high school in East LA, it literally saved my life. And so when people ask, what is the significance of Chicano studies? Where is its place? And how dare somebody like Jess Nieto challenge the norms of introducing academia to these young minds? And what they really are life-saving techniques. It's a CPR kit in the barrio, in the neighborhoods. And so there was a teacher who believed in me and said, Leon, why don't you just stay after class? I got a little something for you to read. And he started just pushing me some libros, some books. And a lot of these books were written about the experiences that were happening here in your backyard. The situation happening in the fields, which was foreign to an East LA youth. Because we were used to, as Chicanos, dealing with police brutality, poverty, access to health care, dealing with those issues. But farm worker issues were just so foreign to us. I mean, there's no fields around us. It's a concrete jungle. So that teacher inspired me through what I was reading. Actually, it just became a reflective mirror of who I was and what my uncles were actually a part of. Working here in the Central Valley, picking oranges, almonds, up and down the valle. So it personalized my experience. In other words, it breathed life into me, you know? And as a result of that, I excelled in school. And, you know, one very important fact that I do want to bring out and that I do want to share is that, you know, studies have shown time and time again that ethnic studies improves graduation rates for communities of color. Just recently, the Los Angeles Unified School District has pushed to introduce Chicano studies, African American studies, Asian American studies, Korean studies in their respective communities of the city of Los Angeles. And so what we've begun to see is a change in graduation rates, the curbing of crime, in disrupting the school-to-prison pipeline, disrupting these industrial prison complexes through the weapon of knowledge. So that gave me the drive to actually be able to move forward in my studies. And so that opened up a window in my mind and in my heart. And so when I landed here at Bakersfield College, I went through a very important program that was called the Summer Bridge Program that Corny was helping direct at the time. And it was targeting students from low-income communities to be able to get a head start on their fall semester that they're going to begin. And that's where Octavio and I met. That's where I met several other individuals. And I gotta tell you, in those classes, not only were they dynamic, not only were they powerful, but that's also where we met Dr. Jess Nieto. That's where we met the man who would go on to be a pivotal individual, a very vital individual in my desarrollo, in my development, in my flowering within the academic arena. I then went on to take classes here, and I have to give very much credit, because I don't know when the next time is that I'm going to see this gentleman, but I'd love to talk to him a little more afterwards. Professor Jack, who I took philosophy with, and I got to tell you, please stand up, please stand up, please stand up. And I got to tell you, you know, when I took that philosophy class, talk about a man who's going to challenge not only your mind, but your writing. And he was no joke. I mean, the guy was a straight shooter. And I remember one of the articles that we had to read in his class that I carry with me till this day, which at the same time as I joined Mecha, simultaneously I was taking Chicano studies with Professor Garza, and then taking philosophy with Dr. Jack. And all of it, you may not know this, Professor Jack, but all of it was being funneled into these Mecha meetings. And it was like contraband of knowledge. And so we were reading these, and one of the very, very fundamental readings that I remember we read in his class was the letter to Birmingham jail from Dr. Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King went to Birmingham and said, you know what, we're going to march. There's a problem here. Segregation is an issue. And he wrote a letter to the press saying, if there's an issue in Birmingham, wherever there's an issue, then we have a responsibility to be there. And Mecha became a vehicle of that. Mecha responded to that. We were the 911 call in the barrios, in the communities. We were that 911 call to each other. And Dr. Jess Nieto helped us refine that. He helped us put together and piece together and connect the dots. Use what you're learning now, organize with the people you're with now, and catapult that. And if it wasn't for that kind of thinking, for recalibrating my mind to be able to think this way, to have people just pour something into your glass of knowledge, then I can sincerely say I would never freaking be in law school. You know, and thanks to the logic that I'm so glad I paid attention to in your class, Jack. You know, it really helped me with that LSAT. But that's what they do. You know, that's what Chicano Studies does. You know, it will help you find your voice. It will help you find who you are. It will help you recalibrate and look at the world through a different lens, and through a lens where you now can stand a little taller. You can now see yourself, because when we honestly say, you know, in our communities, and this is a fact, and this is very true, you tell a kid you can be whatever you want, but all he has seen around him is his entire family's in a working class. There's almost like a glass ceiling there of a social sized, you know? In other communities that are more affluent, they can tell their kids, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. They believe that because they actually have an uncle that's a lawyer. Maybe their dad or mother's a doctor. So we're talking about making a reality, taking form, taking taking what's in the books into practice. And I think one of the most beautiful things that was said earlier from one of the current Mecha members is that Mecha does not encourage you to have these conversations in the science halls of UC Davis, or in the science halls of UCLA, or in the science halls of Bakersfield College. Mecha encourages you to take what you are learning and apply it. Put some application behind it. Because at that point, what good is it to just simply be an armchair revolutionary where you can sit back at Starbucks and witch about every problem under the sun about the world, but yet you're not doing anything about it? So Jess Nieto, Mecha, both served as a very vital vehicle in empowering the generation that came in when I was a part of Mecha here. Octavio ended up going to UCLA. I ended up going to Davis. We used to write to each other every Valentine's. And you've never seen a Chicano, I miss you later. Órale, carnal. I hope you're well. Te mando horchata.
got
So, you know, absolutely. And you know, and another brother that I want to acknowledge that came in here that was a part of our generation, and two of them as well, you know, who also ended up going to Davis with me, who was a part of our Mecha chapter. And this speaks to the quality of education that Bakersfield College was able to offer and continues to offer, and the quality of the professorship that's here. You know, all of these professors, if it wasn't for them, we would have never gotten into these UC schools. We've never gotten as far as law school, you know? So that speaks to the quality of this community college, of the faculty behind this college, the leadership that's leading this faculty and this community college. But a friend of mine, Patrick, who also went to Davis with me, majored in biology, now works for some biotech company doing, I don't know, making juices for you guys. But great guy. Another brother, Abel, who also was part of our generation. But, you know, I'm acknowledging them because they're in this room. They were a part of that generation. Jess Nieto was a part of pushing us further. And now we're just agents of our community to help make this world a better place. And we're doing it through knowledge, through information. And Mecha was vital in that, and so was Dr. Jess Nieto. So it's my honor to be here. It's my honor to share my story with you guys. And I encourage all of you who are current Mechistas, if you're not a Mechista, get involved. If you don't get involved with Mecha, get involved with something, because the world needs to hear your voice. Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, that was very inspiring, and it's good to know that the generation before me, Mecha, when I was here in the Old Testament, many years ago, prior to coming here, and there's been a lot said today, and I don't want to repeat a lot of that. There's so much history between 1971, 72, when I got here, to present, 2017, 18, excuse me. And it's just too much information, and I have so much to talk about, and I don't want to free associate it, because then it would, at the end, the summary would be very confusing. So I'm going to boil it down to this. When I arrived here at BC, I left a rather confusing and kind of violent high school experience. When I first went to elementary school, when I left my house, my mother and my father, very proud Chicanos. We used to say Chicano all the time, but that's the way we described, you know, our gente, you know. Decía Chicano, Gabacho. These kind of little things that I grew up with only exacerbated the beauty of later on finding myself in a movimiento Chicano. Chicano power, Chicano knowledge. Because when I left elementary school, and when I left that front door from my mom's house, my dad's house, I had a very positive view about life. I watched a lot of Leave It to Beaver, Zorro, very happy. I had no problems with identity, really didn't. Everything was cool. It wasn't perfect. But when I left that front door, all that love and that cariño that I had at home, the knowledge that I acquired through my mother, who was a very spiritual lady, not only a religious lady, but a very spiritual lady, and that's very important. Because a lot of people can be religious, but they're not spiritual, and there's a big difference. My mother was very spiritual. And she would tell me, "Mijo, vaya con Dios. When you head out of here, be careful who you hang around with." I got to school, and I didn't know that she was telling me to be careful not to be hanging around with the teacher. I got this letter, this note that was posted up on the wall, and it said, "No speaking Spanish in school." None whatsoever. We had a estudiante de Mexico. He was in our class, a young man, and he was speaking Spanish. And man, my teacher got him from the collar of his neck and took him outside in a violent manner because he spoke Spanish. What does that do to a young man like myself, or any of us that have experienced that? What the heck is going on? You say to yourself, a young boy, a young man, just trying to get along in life, just wants to go and do his math and his reading, whatever students do, and then somebody has to drop that kind of crap on me. You do not speak Spanish in this school. I started asking myself, wonder what's wrong with my people? Why can't, what's up? So this was it's kind of like, it was like a cancer, and it created, little by little, a sense of negativity in my life. Wound up fighting a lot, just there's so much to this. I mean, there's a lot of the transition from a young boy that was very happy at home, had a very negative outlook towards school. I just was not getting along in school. So let's cut from that elementary experience that I had, and I'm sure that many of you here have had that experience. In one way or another, with your coworkers, they're speaking Spanish, you know they're talking about us. I should tell them, yeah, we are talking about you. You're a great person. You're a nice guy, that's what we're saying. You're a nice person. Really? Yes. How do you say nice in Spanish, cabrón? So as I was growing, I got to high school, and eventually I started feeling like, you know what, I started getting this positive reinforcement from some teachers. They kicked me out of class all the time because I used to do this. My desk was one of my first drum sets, and teachers would not tolerate it. Louis, out in the hall. Louis, out in the hall. But it took a young and a motivated teacher to see that when he saw me out in the hallway, this is an experience that I had that has something to do with what I'm going to express further about Mecha and Dr. Nieto. I'm going there, okay? I must tell you, I have a photographic memory, but I run out of film a lot, okay? Sensia. And so I was out in the hall, and the PE teacher, he was passing by, Mr. Timberlake. Un gabacho. Louis, it's winter, you're out in the cold, I see you here just about every other day. What is going on? I told him. Man, you better cool it. Come on, tie your hands to some duct tape or something. And, all right. But that week, he actually did some investigation, and he signed me up to the drum corps. I'll never forget it. He called me after school. He said, come to my office. He said, you know what? You're going to get in the drum corps. You're going to play drums, a snare drum, okay? I said, I don't know how to play it. If I could take my desk with me, I'd be pretty good. But I don't know the drums. So this was a positive, kind of like somebody curtailed the negativity in a very slight way. And that experience helped me in high school, junior high school and high school, to say that not all teachers and not all people are looking at me in a negative way. So it opened up my process in my mind, and eventually I started to get involved in a Chicano group in the 60s when I was in high school with Moses. I had the experience of having the Chicano movement that came by way of Fresno State with Luis Valdez, Teatro Campesino, and then of course one of the great influences of my life, Carlos Santana, the arts. This mixture of influences in my life helped me to get involved in a group at East Bakersfield High School called La Tolteca. ¿Te acuerdas, hermano? And this was this was the opening for me to say La Tolteca. Man, that's making me hungry. I want to eat some caldo or something. And what happened was that it got me involved in wanting to know more about the Aztecs, the Toltecs, and so forth. So my high school years started to develop a little bit more. Because, why? Because I started getting back the identity that was stolen from me. I was scarred as a young man because they told me that in so many ways, no speaking Spanish in this school. And these are my teachers that are saying, this is a poster that's going out and telling all of us this. So I thank God today that I graduated from high school, and I got a couple of scholarships. Oh my gosh, it was just a tremendous thing. I arrived here at BC in 1970. First, in 1971, there was a program that had us come here, and I met Jess Nieto, and I was telling Debbie about it. That they had created a committee back then that wanted us to give a view of Dr. Jess Nieto if he was up to par with what you students, Chicano students, would consider a person with a personality of educating and specializing in teaching young Chicanos our history. Well, needless to say, Dr. Nieto was one of the most positive influences that I've ever had in my life. He I'm sorry. He was a person that was always there to listen to me. My wild ideas about music and about culture and so forth, and he just was always available. Louis, here's my number, call me anytime. And it's because of this gentleman that when I came to BC, that I learned more about the intellect and the history of my people. Everything from the Aztecs to pre-Columbian Aztecs and Revolution, Chicano movement, Cesar Chavez, Brown Berets, it was all there. As I mentioned to you, I apologize because there's so much that, but the bottom line is that all of this had, they say that your experiences are the sum of, well, how is that said? The sum of your, or the sum of your life, something like that. Yet that your experiences throughout life give you an identity in the present. And my presence today, because of Dr. Nieto and Peggy and Cornelius, these guys, and David Rosales, Debbie, Dwayne Goff, a ball of fire, just roaring and letting everybody know how important it is to study and get into politics and get into the Chicano movement. And I appreciate them all. There's so much that can be said. And what I have done now in my life, I went on to college, and I did graduate, and I went to Harvard for lunch. And but in conclusion, it's not a conclusion, but I chose the field of the arts, music, because it's people like who I just mentioned that made me feel that your imagination and your desire to fulfill something that you feel in your heart, not something just that you feel in your wallet, but something that you want to do, something that you want to do inside. If that's the reason for us to have, to me that is the absolute reason is why we need to have mecha. We need to have, because Jess Nieto was mecha. All of you are mecha in one way or another, just by being raza, just by being a humanitarian. Because the Chicano, he is the universal human. He knows his culture, he knows his environment, he knows about the war, he knows about the Alamo, he knows everything. Okay? The Aztecs, and he's very universal, and he's very open-minded. But most of all is that the representation that Jess has, I'm sure that all of you have that fire in you, is that he passed on. And he didn't let an inconvenience of life get in his way to teach a young man that there's a lot of possibilities to follow your desire and your dreams. And for that, I'm a musician today. I've traveled all over the world. I've been to Africa, you name it, the Caribbean, Europe, played everywhere. This little Chicano from Bakersfield, I'm going to be at the Smithsonian. I was selected, my Latin jazz salsa band, to play there. I played the Playboy Jazz Festival. I played for governors. You name it. I've done it. Musically speaking, I've accomplished quite a bit. I'm not saying that to brag. Maybe a little. Okay? Maybe a little. But that's not the reason. The thing is that because of people like Jess Nieto and the people that I have mentioned, and many of you, Patino, there's so many people that I see here that are a big part of my life. Is Jenna Flores here? Huh?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
She will be here. Beautiful, Chicana, hermana, powerful. These people have big influence in my life. And I just want to say that they allowed me to make choices that were not always choices that said the wallet, as I mentioned earlier, but your soul. What do you want to do? Where are you going to be the most effective? And the arts has helped me to introduce to many different cultures and many different types of people, Chinese, Africans, Japanese, Greek, every type of person you can imagine on this earth, to speak to them through music, because music has become like the ambassador or diplomat to humanity. And I chose this field because not only did I play congas and sing and so forth, but it allowed me the opportunity to go into South Central, East LA, and teach kids the discipline of music and how you can use music and art to capture their attention, and then clandestinely, in a revolutionary way, educate them. Tell them how discipline, come to school every day, don't miss school. It gives me that opportunity to do that. And so I appreciate Jess and all of you that I mentioned, and even more. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry, I got emotional because that's how much Jess means to me. There are not human words to express my feelings towards Jess Nieto, Peggy and his family, and many of you that are here. I love you. Gracias. I'm humbled by what you've done.
My name is Dwayne Goff, and I was one of the co-founders of Mecha. I think one of the things to remember, first of all, I want to, before I forget, because I'll forget if I don't do it now, one of the people that also deserves to be thanked, he worked very closely with Jess Nieto, he worked very closely with students, he was always on the student side, even when he had to say no to us. He hated saying no, and that was Vic St. Marie. I had to say no because his job was to represent the educational institution, not our desires. But he was a great man to work with. But you have to remember the era in which Mecha was born. He was born in '68 down in Santa Barbara, and had little babies all over the state, little by little. When he was born here, it was '71. We were still in the middle of fighting the Vietnam War, and we were still in the middle of, Martin Luther King had just been assassinated 2 years before. And there was still a lot of anger over that. And any time in Kern County that you stood up and said anything against the status quo, their response was, "You're a communist, aren't you?" So you have to remember that. And this is no joke. Bernice will tell you. If you registered as a Democrat, that in itself said you were a communist. Okay? That's how right-wing this county was. It's different now, right?
No.
Chicanos are being killed by the police in those days just like now. We just didn't get in the newspapers. Okay? We just didn't get in the newspapers. Bakersfield PD in one case beat a Mexicano to the ground and then stomped his hands till all his fingers were broken. I saw the autopsy photos. I had an attorney ready to sue his family for loss of his feelings. Unfortunately, he was a get-down alcoholic who hadn't visited his mother in 14 years. There's no way you're going to win in court. So the police got away with that. Naji Daifula was a little tiny Yemenite that worked for the farm workers. And in the summer of 1972, he was beat to death by a Kern County deputy in Lamont. He was in my crew. I knew him personally. Not real close because he didn't speak English. But he was a nice guy. He was a scared little guy. He was a tiny guy. He was about 5'4", 85, 90 pounds. That's what we were living with in those days. We knew that when the police said, "I'll shoot you," they meant it. And in that environment, there was a lot of pressure to not be Mecha. You're lucky we let you be UMAS, United Mexican American Students. You're lucky we let you call yourself Mexican American. I began Bakersfield College as a student in 1971 after my return from Vietnam. And pardon my English, but when I got here, I just didn't give a shit. I was filled with anger. I was filled with anger about Chicanos dying in Vietnam for nothing. I was filled with anger about the way they were treated while they died. They were still wetbacks and spits in Vietnam. So when I came here, I saw an opportunity to address those issues, and I joined UMAS. And there was a couple of people that were kind of like not too popular at UMAS because we were different. Me, because I was a güero from Ridgecrest. I guess they didn't hear about the Jalisco Chicanos. And Debbie, because she lived on the wrong side of town, the rich side. So Debbie and I became friends, and Debbie was an excellent researcher. And Debbie would come to me and say, "Hey, Dwayne, guess what? Blah, blah, blah." She'd get some information. I'd go to the UMAS meeting, and I'd say, "You know, what we ought to do is, yeah, sure, okay." And they would poo-poo it. So Debbie comes to me one day and she says, "You know, Dwayne, student government controls over $350,000. We ought to get some Chicanos on the student government and have a voice." And so I went to the UMAS meeting and I brought that up. And so I'll never forget one of the guys, he couldn't stop laughing because to him it was a joke. He made a motion that I be the chair for the Political Action Committee. And it was unanimous, okay, now, we're done with you, get out of the way. And he went on to the more important issues, whatever they were. So I said, well, they elected me. I'm going to do it. So I went out and started finding Chicanos to run for student body. And I found 11. 10 of which said, see, what you had to do was you had to have a paper with all your classes on it and take it, and each one of your professors had to sign that you were doing at least C-level work. And 10 of the 11 said, "You take my paper around for me, and I'll run." So here I am with all these professors, you know, and I got them all signed up. And then I said, "So we're going to have a party to make up posters." "No, you're going to do the posters, I'm going to do the name left." So a little handful of us. Remember Rocha? He was a Latino from, I think, Delano or Wasco, who was in the Sikh religion. So he looked like an Indian, but he was actually a Native American. But he helped us do the signs. So people came to the school one day, to the campus, and there were signs all over the walls, all over the hallways, for all these different students. Now, you have to remember something. Does anybody know how many Spanish surname people there are in students at the school today? Ballpark figure? 500, 5,000?
67%, over 13,000.
Over 13,000. We had less than 300. And there were 19 positions on student government. We ran candidates for 11 of them, and we won all 11. Now we're ready to kick ass, and we did. So the first thing we did was we allocated $5,000 to UMAS for not a Cinco de Mayo, but a Semana de la Raza. We celebrated all week long. We had people here like Uri Acuña, Corky Gonzalez, Daniel Valdez. Cesar never could make it. He was kind of busy in those days.
No, he made it.
Well, he didn't make it here.
Yeah, he did once.
Okay. Octavio Romano, oh, he was awesome. Octavio Romano, there used to be a thing at this campus called the fireside room. I don't know why the administration. I must be looking at the wrong room. Okay. I saw somebody open the door and I went, "Is that the fireside room?" Okay. Well, he came into the fireside room and he sat down and we had a conversation with him. And I'll never forget, one of the students, she was at the time president of UMAS, she said, "Professor, you know, we tell our parents what we're doing and there's so much that needs to be done in the community, but they just don't want to help. How can we get our parents to help? And he said, do you speak Spanish in your home? She said, yes. When you make a mistake, do your parents correct you? She said, yes. He said, they're helping. Next question. The point being, sometimes we don't even know that we're helping, you know, because we have the right attitude, and it does help. So we started off with the student government control, which we had for 2.5 semesters. After that first year, we had in 71, 72, no, 72, 73, in the fall of 72, we started school with the grape boycott going on, grape and lettuce boycott. So we got involved in that, and I went over to the, I think his name was Heffernan. He was the dean, someone had oversight of that. And I said, we object to the fact that you're bringing scab lettuce and scab grapes to this campus. We have students here whose parents are making sacrifices to be involved in the strike, and you are feeding them scab lettuce and scab grapes. It's like spitting in their face. You can't do that. He said, I don't know what to tell you, Dwayne. It's, you know, we've got a contract. You can tell them to bring, you know, Union lettuce and Union grapes. He said, I can't do that. I said, well, we're going to boycott the cafeteria. I said, okay, do what you got to do. So we set up tables and started giving out free food. And we got that free food from Chicano business people in Bakersfield. Free. And we set the tables up. And they came by and they got the free coffee in the morning, the free donuts. And we didn't care if they went in the cafeteria and ate them. The point was they weren't going to spend any money in there. And in 2 days, they let off 2 workers. In 2 more days, they let off 5 workers. The following week, on Monday, I think it was, might have been Tuesday, Mr. Heffernan called me. I want to talk to him. I said, sure. Went in. He said, we got to end this. It's having this impact and this impact. And I said, not a problem. So you're going to have Union lettuce and Union grapes? And he said, well, I don't think we can do that. I said, well, we got nothing to talk about. I didn't have to get up this early, did I? So I left. That same day, 4 white students attacked 4 Chicanos who were sitting in the quad just outside the cafeteria in these heavy steel chairs. And the 4 white dudes jumped the 4 Chicanos, and they made a mistake of jumping 4 brown boys from Lamont. So as they were getting their butts whipped, out of desperation, they picked up one of the steel chairs and they threw it at a Chicano, who I guess has some matador in it. He just sidestepped it and then slid right by and broke this giant glass. It was like a whole wall. And that evening, I got a phone call from the guys to tell me what had happened. Okay, fine. Next morning, I got a call from Mr. Heffernan. He wanted to talk about it. And so I went in and talked to him again. And I said, you know, I got the story. I know what happened. It's your side that started the fight. My side didn't do nothing but defend themselves. I don't know what to tell you. He said, we can't let this happen again. I said, tell your side to quit throwing chairs. That's how it happened. And he felt I was being a little too glib, wasn't taking it serious. I was taking it serious. I was just glib. So he said, so you're gonna keep doing the same thing? I said, yeah. Now, what I meant when I said yeah was, we're gonna keep the boycott going. What he thought I meant, and I didn't correct it, was, you're gonna keep the violence going. Go ahead, think that. I don't care. Because I read Saul Alinsky, he said that's a good thing. So I walked out of there with him thinking that we're going to be happy with the violence. We got no problem with that. And what I never actually said anything about violence. What I was talking about was going to keep the boycott going. So I left. About an hour later, I guess he talked to some other folks in the administration, and he found me on campus. And he says, okay, Dwayne, you can have it. We'll get Union grapes and lettuce. I said, out of sight. I said, what time are the grapes and lettuce delivered? He said, why do you want to know that? I said, we're going to go check for the bug. You don't think we trust you, do you? And so for the next 2 weeks, we had somebody out there at 6 in the morning making sure there was a bug in that box, that little Union label. And then we kind of died off and figured it's okay. But we won that in less than 2 weeks. And we won it because we were united and because there were non-Chicano people on this campus who supported our mission. We had this one lady, she was probably about 50. White lady came by every day, got a cup of coffee and a donut every day. And one of the guys goes, man, this lady comes to here every day, man, coffee, donut. She doesn't drop in nothing, no, not even a nickel. And I said, who cares? She's not buying it from the cafeteria. I said, oh, good point. One day, I think it was a Friday, she walks by and she drops a $20 bill in there. Sorry, she says, I was waiting for my husband to get paid. So that's how he won. So when you are able to show the other side how important this issue is to you, when you're able to show the other side that you are not only willing to fight for it, but willing to die for it. And in those days, that's what we were saying. We had to. I don't know how things are on this campus today. I really don't. But in those days, that's what it really was. Okay? I can't even begin to count how many times the police beat me up. But I'm still here. I don't know if it's because I'm stupid or brave, but I'm still here. And there's a lot of other Chicanos in the same boat. It's not unique, for me. Non-Chicanos, people who didn't even know what the issue was, learned about the issue, and when you explain it to them in simple, single-syllable words, they go, oh, that ain't right. I said, I know, come on, march with us. So I got people who don't know what it means down there yelling, si se puede, si se puede. This is what we had in 1971 and 72. We were the center for political action among Chicanos at Bakersfield College. We knew we needed more Chicanos to come here. So what did we do? Every year for La Semana de la Raza, we brought in a guy, some of you might remember him, Ray Camacho. Remember Ray Camacho? He came from Fresno with his whole band, and all he charged us was his transportation cost, which was like $250. And he played on the campus, a free concert. The people had to come from their homes to Bakersfield to college to see Ray Camacho for free. But that was the first time that most of them had ever been on the campus. And we wanted them to know, hey, your taxes paid for this stuff yet? This is yours too? And we did increase the population, what did you say, 13,000 now?
Over.
So, it did work. And then later on, as I was in the tail end of my time here and ended up moving to Sacramento, I got all these people I talk about, you got to get your education, you got to get your degree. I never got mine. I got appointed to work on some special projects for the governor, and I jumped at the chance. Never had time to go back to school. So I was lucky. I don't encourage that. But in that time, from my last semester at Bakersfield College to my first year or so in Sacramento, when I met some powerful, powerful Chicanos, Mario Bledo, Carlos Alcalá, just some fantastic Chicanos who'd been through similar fights in their communities. And we shared, war stories, and we shared wisdom. And one of the things I came to realize is none of us started the movimiento. I don't know who started it, but it was before us. We need to always remember, no matter how hard we're fighting, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Some of the students today are standing on the shoulders of Jess Nieto. Jess stood on the shoulders of Dr. Ray Gonzalez. Ray Gonzalez was kicking ass in this town when he was doing it by himself, just him and his liberal white friends. But they were doing it, because it was the right thing to do. Bernice was just a young lady, registering Democrats in those days, So none of us started it. Let's make sure none of us end it. That's all that matters. Because it was either, I'm pretty sure it was Caesar said to me one time, Senator Chavez, he said, the lucha does not end because eventually people, when they see their particular part of the struggle, they feel like they have succeeded, then they become complacent. And they're okay with the status quo. And then Caesar said, if you are part of the status quo, you're part of the problem. So I guess the message is, what you did in the past, whether it was last week or 20 years ago, you should still be doing it today. I love my friend Janet Flores, who unfortunately is not here. Janet Flores still counsels women down at her college. Janet Flores still kicks butt.
Yes.
She ain't backed off one bit.
Nope.
And Janet Flores has a nice middle-class life. She's also, you know, got her rewards for getting her education, but she never forgets where she came from. And that's really what it's all about, is not forgetting where you came from and realizing you owe. Don't ever forget, you owe.
Yes.
So, thank you for this opportunity.
Interject, if I may, Madre, un poquito. Just wanted to multitask. We're going over a little bit on the next panel. We can have Javier, Olivia. We could multitask and well, Deborah says, mentioned talking about your experiences. If we can load up your presentations while that's happening, and also so we can transition and we'll on to the next one a little bit quicker. Excuse me. Gracias.
Thank you, Fabio. Like Dwayne and Louis said, we were here in 1971, 72, and 73. And like Selene, I owe a lot to Jess. I don't think there's anybody with any teaching position here at Bakersfield College that doesn't owe something to Jess and to Ray Gonzalez. And one of the gentlemen that we've talked about briefly is Vic St. Marie. Vic helped us tremendously. I'll talk briefly about that, but somebody that has been looked over constantly has been Dr. Jack Hernandez.
Yeah.
Dr. Jack Hernandez was the man that would wear that beautiful blue blazer. He was the assistant to the president, so he was one of us. To me, he carried himself beautifully. He spoke to us beautifully. He encouraged us. Just the acknowledgement of saying, hello, how are you? Sometimes that's all anybody needs. Like the homeless person, the student that's lost. Leon and I and the Patiños, we were lost earlier. We said hello to a friendly face, got us right where we needed to be. That's what was important. And Jess was always very generous with his time, as was Dr. Hernandez and Vic St. Marie. And somebody else that was always there for us, but I think we took it for granted, was Louis, the janitor. Louis was there to clean up all our messes. To clean up, and then if you lost something, to make sure that something was open for you. You needed an extra cord because we were doing something, we needed a presentation, we needed something. He made sure it was there for us. And I think too many times we forget all the people because sometimes we think we're big people in something. And unfortunately, that's what happened to so many people. But Jess was this freshman when I was a freshman here at BC. A skinny guy with thick glasses, not a very tall guy, but a guy with a big voice that had to deal with us that were going to the high school on the hill, and those that were angry, as Dwayne had said, angry veteran students, that there was this little guy that wasn't much older than they were, or was a lot younger than they were, trying to tell them that they had to study, we had to do this, we had to do that, and everything else. And so Jess loved us all, and I imagine at times he hated us too, because there's a very thin line between that. And so consequently, Jess taught us how important it was to be inclusive. As Selene has told you, and as Louis has told you, and many of the other students here, as Lorraine will tell you, and Sandy, and Esther? No, yeah. Rachel, okay, Rachel. They will tell you, Jess was always very generous to all of us. And his wife, Peggy, and his family were generous to us because they sat on the sidelines. Although they were enriched in a different way, they sat on the sidelines. They were the force behind Jess that loved Jess when so many people would close the door in Jess's face. So quick forward, because you've heard so many things that we did do or didn't do. It was important that we as MECHA, when we took MECHA on, worked within MECHA and a statewide level. So with Dwayne and I, with the help of Vic St. Marie and Jess Nieto, and we heard that Dr. Hernandez had facilitated many things for us, had a campus-wide Chicano conference. The first one in the state of California. We invited all the junior colleges. We had Alurista, the poet, Clarissa Torres that worked with Alurisa talked to us. We had a Pinto workshop. So this is where Jess showed us, see, be inclusive, include everybody, not just who you think you are and you're at a certain level and look down at people. With this Pinto workshop, and then we had John Vasconcelos. He was in charge of the master plan for higher education in those days, and he came and spoke with us. We had entertainment, we had beauty. The Dean of Student Activities, Vic St. Marie, made sure that we were able to house students on campus that time because, you know, we're asking you to come in from San Diego, from different places, all the northern cities and that. But where were you going to stay? How were you going to eat? What were you going to do? So the gym at nighttime was turned into a big slumber party. There were facilities to shower in the dorms, and food was donated to us. So there was a very small registration fee. And by doing all this, we networked with many Latinos and with many Chicanos, and we reestablished and reinforced Mecha being here at Bakersfield College. And along the process, Wayne's cousins, Pete, who was very quiet, came along with us, and then we dragged along Dr. Rosales. Where is Dr. Rosales? Not Oliver, the old Dr. Rosales. The one with the thinning hair like all of us. But anyway, so that's how we moved forward with everything. And so we ran the student government, we had convocation, we spoke Spanish, and unlike, unfortunately, other people, my experience with being a Chicana was different because I was always taught to speak Spanish. I came from grandparents that didn't speak English, and my grandfather would not allow us to speak English in front of my grandmother. And then also because I have the fortune of being born on September 16th, Mexico's Independence Day. And my grandfather wanted my mom to name me Porfiria or Benita or something like that. So you can imagine what life would have been like in the rest of the world. So we moved forward with everything. And then people came along and we had a student government. We ran this, what was it called? The court. What was it called? The student government court. With the Chief Justice, Ismael Garza, was one of us. The freshman class president, the sophomore class president. And then we had a great collaboration with the Black Students Union, with Rich Richardson. He was our business manager. And he said, okay, you want the company, all these, not companies, but you want these groups that don't do anything for student government and don't do anything but just take a lot, want to really put the screws to them. I said, okay, fine. He said, you get up at 7, I'll get up at 7, and we'll have meetings. You come and give us your presentation at 7:30 in the morning. And when they didn't come, we just wrote them off. There was that much more money for us. So, and for other projects too on campus. So that was important. But what I really want to talk to you about is not that Jess was a perfect person or wasn't a perfect person, but that he mentored to us. But it was important for Jess to get us out to vote. We're in the position where we are today with the president that we have today and the congressman that we have today that doesn't take care of us. They don't include us. They're not inclusive. And it's because we as students, when you're a student, you don't get involved. You don't run for student body, or you don't even run for dog catcher because, hi, get pinche dog catcher. No, that's where everybody gets their foot in the door. They learn how to run the system. And we have not done that. We have a lady, Mary Helen Wells, that's running for office.
Congress.
Yeah, Congress. But we need to have her here. But I'm saying she's running for office. She's running for Congress. We need to have her here. She's one of us. She went to school here. She was one of the Bill Gates recipients of money. So she's not any slouch. So, and even if she were, it's time we give a Latina a chance. Can't do any worse than what we have now.
Yeah.
And that only happens if you go out to vote. But only, like Obama says, you just don't go out to vote. You just don't worry for what's right there in front of your nose because it's getting cut off constantly. You say, hey, you, and you. And hey, by the way, do you need a ride? Do you need me to do something for you? You open up your mouth, and then you have a right to bitch. But until you don't do that, and you don't get off your fat butt because you want to make sure everything else, you're watching the novela at home, or you're having a beer, or whatever it is, you're too comfortable, then you don't have any rights. And you're taking other people's rights away. Never in my God-given days in high school and college did I ever think that women wouldn't have rights. When did I think that? We're so worried about, yes, abortion may not be right, but how about all the women that aren't getting their mammograms and getting their ultrasounds or even getting proper medication because of the lack of medical care and medical insurance? And not only that, how about in here recently, the people that are being gunned down in masses? Who takes care of them? When your insurance company tells you, hey, you've maxed out. Well, you probably was a pre-existing condition, or we don't know. How are all those people supposed to thrive? How are they supposed to get well? We're not letting them get well, and we're not voicing our opinion, and we're not fighting Kevin McCarthy. We need to tell him, just like the students and like we were told, they work for us. We need to be there boycotting. We need to send him maybe a ton of red Starbursts so that he can lick them open and make sure they're digestible for our president. These are the things, and we need to do it now. We can't start, November, whatever the magic day is that we're going to vote. We need to get out and start talking now. You need to talk to your comadres, your compadres, your dentist, your lawyer if you have one, whoever it is, your hairdresser, your manicurist. You need to go out there and you need to make sure we're voting. And then one last passing moment. It's great for us to be able to relive our past. And Jess has dragged us through things. Jess dragged me out of whatever it was I was doing, although I was active with other things, to be with the students when they got rid of the Chicano Cultural Center. If the community, once we, springboarded off of Bakersfield College, we need to come back and be involved in the community. We need to know why there aren't more Chicano teachers, professors, counselors, whatever. We need to know, because, oh yes, it's beautiful, it's great to hear, like Corny says, there's now 13,000 of us here on campus, but education continues. But it's only not because we had a Chicana president at Bakersfield College, or then the district, or we had a Chicano at Cal State Bakersfield. It's only because we've gotten bigger in numbers. It's not because they've done an extraordinary job of bringing Latinos in. So we need to hold everybody accountable. And for that, I suggest, as one of my last comments to you, is that everybody that would like to see Bakersfield College put Octavio Barajas on the fast track for a professor, please stand up. You can't be complacent, you can't be complicit. You need to stand up, because a picture paints is worth more than 1,000 words. So stand up, so when they say, well, it was just Deborah there, and Dwayne, like Sandra used to tell us, and Selene, and Thavo, and of course they're probably compadres with Octavio. And no, stand up so that they can see when the camera pans, your face is doing something positive starting today. So get up off your butt and get up so we can take the county. Come on. So I hope when we need your names, if you're willing, that later on at some point this evening, even if it's on a binder piece of paper, we'll be getting names and phone numbers. If you would like to make sure that your voice is heard, and I know we have a representative here that will make sure our voices will be heard, and will drag us there. And if you're from out of town and you can't be here with us, say prayers for us. Say prayers that everybody stays strong and we take care of the business we need to take care of, and we're starting today again, okay?
Muchas gracias.
One thing I forgot to mention, the legacy of the Chicanos of 71 and 72 is your health center. We created it for all students, not for Chicanos.
How about this, everyone? So much energy in the room. We have so much history, so many things. Recollected the memories of history of just this one organization alone, of right here emanating so much energy, so much activity, recollecting a history of memory, but also still that fire that's present in the present day. You can see so much energy putting forth and encouraging us to really think critically and reflect on what's being said today, and highly encouraged to move on that reflection and putting those reflections into action. Okay, and so with the interest of time, we're gonna postpone the Q&A, and we need to transition and move on to the next panel that we'll be discussing faculty. Well, before we transition into the next faculty panel, I also want to give a little shout out to Delano Campus, who's also listening. They're live streamed Delano Campus right now. Los saludo, folks. And I want to call Brother Dr. Oliver Rosales to help us transition into our next faculty panel.
Yeah, so if I could invite the panelists up front, I'll introduce you one at a time very briefly. My name is Oliver Rosales. I'm a professor of history here at Bakersfield College. I also want to make a pitch for the Digital Delano Grant, which is digitizing materials as we speak. If there's folks who have memories of Jess Nieto, memories of the Chicano movement that you want to get recorded, please go outside into the hall and you will be directed to the oral history room, and we're welcoming you there. I'm going to introduce all three speakers one at a time briefly. They have impressive resumes in the order in which they are going to speak. Javier Llamas, who is an adjunct professor of history here at Bakersfield College. He's also a librarian at CSU Bakersfield, so I encourage you to go bug him over there. He's a former veteran, graduate of East Bakersfield High School, here in his BA and MA in history from Cal State Bakersfield, and we were actually in graduate school together. He's a very smart young man. Our next speaker will be Olivia Garcia. She is assistant professor of history here at Bakersfield College. She grew up in southeast Bakersfield in the Little Okie or La Colonia, a graduate of South High, and for anybody who's been reading the Bakersfield California in the past 20 years, you probably remember Olivia from being a very wonderful journalist for the Californian and editor of Bakersfield Life magazine. She also is the current advisor for our Bakersfield College Metro chapter and an executive board member for the Kern County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And our final speaker will be Professor Gonzalo Santos, who is a professor of sociology, at CSU Bakersfield. And Professor Santos in particular has educated so many people in this community, and to read his vita would just take way too long. But I'll just say this about Dr. Santos, is that he's really embodies to me the kind of legacy of engaged scholarship, and I think we're all in for a treat for listening to Professor Santos today. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Is this?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Octavio for setting us up, Dr. Rosales for the introduction, panelists, everybody here. It's a pleasure to be part of this event. And as soon as this thing comes up, I can focus more. But my part of this discussion is based on sort of the pre-Chicano movement, the rise of the Mexican American community here in Bakersfield. And so I focus on the years of 1890, 1920s, because again, this is fairly brief, but just kind of to introduce what happens before the Depression, before World War II, and then that leads into that Chicano movement. Peter Kropotkin, in his book, Mutual Aid, Facts of Revolution, writes that mutual aid is as old as society itself, right? And he says, the collective self-help seems to gain importance as a vehicle for cooperation among individuals when coping with their environment. So this idea of self-help is not specific to the Mexican community or the Chicano community. It's something in life itself. But every community, every Mexican-American community that has developed in the United States has a sort of a vehicle of self-help, whether it's the actual mutualistas or just another form of. And this is taken by Jose Hernandez in his book, Mutual Aid for Survival. So I want to just go into the brief of the original Mexican settlements here in Kern County. And when the Spanish were around, they really didn't delve much into the valley. It was mostly the southern band of Yokuts. And when the Mexicans came through, almost the same thing. But towards the end of the Mexican hold on this area, you start to see the 5 land grants here. But one of the important things that I like to point out is how the river back then went all the way down into the 2 lakes, the Kern Lake and Buena Vista Lake. That, of course, Kern Lake doesn't exist anymore. But these communities of Rio Bravo, Panama, and Saletral was where the original Mexican settlements actually existed here in Bakersfield. In 1849, the Cuen family and the Montano family started to come through and started to live in this area, and they named it Rio Bravo because the river was very harsh, very rough river, right, pretty much. This is not to be confused with the Rio Bravo down here on the east side, 178. But as more communities started growing, it became known as Old Panama, as a new Panama was created. And I put the intersections of where they're at. That's where we get these names, Stein and Panama Lane and Stein and Panama Road. By the time Miller, Lux, Hagen, and Carr come through, they start developing this area. They're pushed farther into this area known as Saletral, which is about a quarter mile northwest of the new Panama. But nonetheless, this is where the communities were, the original ones. And that idea of self-help, not the Mutualista just yet, but the self-help is evident here. This community, the Cuen family, the Montano family, and then later on, the Castro family, as they came through, they pulled their resources together and they built the first school. They paid for a traveling teacher from Los Angeles to arrive and teach their kids. And a lot of people don't know this, but this is the basis of the Panama Buena Vista School District. These guys have set up these schools in the south of Bakersfield. So even then, from the get-go, from 1849 forward, you start to see this idea of self-help, the thing that Kropotkin was talking about. That environment causes communities to come together, pull their resources, and for the betterment of society. After the 1860s, you start to see there's a civil war in the United States, but Mexico has a war itself with French intervention, and people are familiar with that. This is where you get the Battle of Puebla in 1862, Cinco de Mayo. But one of the things that happens out of this movement is you start to see these juntas patrióticas, as I have on top, these patriotic committees. And what they started to do, especially in San Jose and the Alma del Mines, that was very prominent, Los Angeles, of course, having another one, is that they started to throw celebrations, parties, and they were trying to recoup money from the celebrations and send money to Mexico to help the war effort against the French. Now you gotta remember, this is 1862. There's a civil war in the United States. So these people are getting together, but they're sending money to Mexico, not for the Union effort, not for the Southern effort. Even though here in Kern County there was Southern sympathizers, they got together and sent money for the Southern cause. But nonetheless, you start to see these juntas patrióticas develop into sort of the precursors of these mutualistas that would eventually happen later. By 1874, the war's already over in Mexico, these juntas patrióticas still exist. And this article from 1889 talks about the Colonia Mexicana of Sumner and Bakersfield. This is where the name comes from. This colonia of where these people lived, that was the Mexican colony. That's where the Mexicans lived. No longer the settlements, now they're living in the city, and it's the colonia. And one of the main things that they would do is these bear and bullfights, and I thought I'd put it up here. It's obviously PETA would not be happy with this, but it's what they did. Rodeos, dances, Cinco de Mayo being a Mexican-American celebration, and of course these bear and bullfights that people would do. And this happened here in Bakersfield as well. And one of the things that I like to show in my classes is when you read your textbook that talks about LA, it talks about San Francisco, and talks about the Bay Area, it's happening in Bakersfield too. And here's an example. The bear and bullfights here in Bakersfield, the colonias, and the juntas patrióticas here. I'm going kind of fast because I kind of speed up stuff. Bear with me. I apologize for the speed. Good. By 1879, you see that the city of Bakersfield starts to develop, but with a disagreement with the railroad, East Bakersfield is created as a town of Sumner. And you can see by the little dots, this is where East Bakersfield, or Sumner as it's called back then, and here is Bakersfield. There's quite a distance. By 1910, when you have the annexation of the east side, you see the streets are now sort of connected. But right now, we're going to focus on this one, and I'll come back to this one as a reference. So in 1879, you start to see the arrival of Max Nunez. Now, Max Nunez was born in these New Almaden mines that I was talking about earlier. So he was very, very aware of the Juntas Patrióticas, the very active politically and in government and in business. And he arrives to Bakersfield in the 1880s, and right away he immerses himself into the political scene. Okay. Here in 1893, you see that he is one of the political participants of the Kern City Mexican Club. Of course, Kern City being East Bakersfield. It was called Sumner at first, then it became Kern City. Then when it was annexed, that name East Bakersfield started to pick up. So the Kern City Mexican Club, here he's a secretary, and he was also one of the founding members of the Kern, the Mexicanos Republicanos, so the Mexican Republicans of Kern City. Back then, the parties were kind of switched up. It kind of throws you off on that one. And here you see that in the Republican primaries, we have Max Nunez as one of the delegates of Sumner, East Bakersfield. So he's very active politically, but also in the business sense. In 1895, he opens the very first employment agency for Mexican Americans in the city of Bakersfield. Here you have Max Nunez as proprietor, 19th Street. In 1895, by 1906, he also has one in Kern City, which is East Bakersfield. Right? And here, Max Nunez, and one of the things that I thought was very important, that he runs this out of a saloon, right? And he offers you the best liquors and cigars with employment. So, if you get a job, you get a shot of something and a cigar. Right? And another thing that gets my attention is the phone number. His phone number is 511. It's very easy to remember. Right? But unfortunately for Max Nunez, he does pass away in 1906. He succumbs to an illness, so we don't know what his legacy could have been or would have been. But nonetheless, he made a mark, at least on the east side. He was an overseer for the roads. He was a developer. And through his Almaden background, he was a ditch digger, and he brought water into Sumner. So it was very important for the growth of the east side, but you don't hear much about him. But this is sort of the start. Now we're over here. In 1909, the city of East Bakersfield votes to be annexed by the city of Bakersfield, and you start to see the connection with the streets here. This region here, this will be California Avenue. This is Baker, the train station. So it will be in this area here that the Colonia starts to develop. This is California. This will be where Our Lady of Guadalupe is at now. Right? This is Colonia. This is the colony, the Mexican colony. And the person that comes at this time is J.C. Nava. Right? Jesus Cruz Nava. He was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. He was brought in by a congregation of the church to lead their Mexican mission because they felt spiritually that the Mexicans were sort of lost. We need somebody to kind of bring them into the church, and who else to bring is a Mexican to do it, right? One of the things that George Sanchez's book, Becoming Mexican American, notes is that the Catholic Church didn't really promote a lot of Mexicans in the Catholic Church, so a lot of them were led by Irish or Portuguese or Italians. But what the Protestant churches were doing is they were hiring from within, so they started getting a lot of participation. And this, obviously, Catholic Church caught notice and they started changing their ways. But nonetheless, J.C. Nava arrived in 1909, and right away wants to set up his Mutualista Hall. And this is pretty much the core of this talk, is right away in December of 1910, on Christmas, he gets together with the Mexican leadership of East Bakersfield, this region of the Colonia, and he says, we need to set up a mutual aid association. And they do on Christmas of 1910. And these are, of course, in lieu of government services, where you have funeral arrangements, medical help, and unemployment. So if you get sick, or you pass away, or if you get injured, they assist with that. But not so much society, and this is a plaque that's currently there at the Juarez Hall that commemorates this event. But one of the things that he also wants to do is, we want to use this mutual aid hall as the center of all activities of the Colonia. So what he does is, in 1910, he founds the very first Spanish newspaper in Bakersfield, known as El Centenario,
to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Mexican independence. Nunez, being the Mexican American, he was big on Cinco de Mayo, right? Nava, being Mexican, was big on September 16th, right? That's something that a lot of groups know this. But this first newspaper, founded by J.C. Nava here, as you can see, wants to celebrate. And in this articles, he writes in Spanish and in English, and he wants the community to be able to read articles from Mexico. And he writes a lot of opinion-based writings as to what's going on in the community. That way everybody can understand what's going on. Another thing is, the next year, the first Christmas after that, the Christmas parties. Right? Always have a Christmas party at these events, and it still goes on to this day. The Salon Juarez still maintains this yearly Christmas parties every year starting in 2011, so they've been going on for at least 106 years strong. But anyway, the Sociedad Juarez, and in these parties, there were always music, there were also literary programs, so you had orators that would come in and speak, right, give speeches. So the community would get together, finally have a place to be along with everybody else that looks like them, that speaks like them, and they get somebody that can go out there, and Nava was that head, the leader of this group. Education, he knew that education was important, and a lot of these kids from this colonias either didn't speak English or didn't have the opportunity to go to school, so he developed the very first Spanish-English school out of the Juarez Hall. Right? And he led this one with a company of obviously an English speaker that can help. But J.C. Nava led this movement as well. And lastly, of course, the celebrations, always celebrations, whether Cinco de Mayo or September 16. The Juarez Hall would always throw these celebrations, and they would have parades through the city, through a Baker Street all the way down to the hall, and then followed by a barbecue, and of course, sometimes they would have cannon shots and recitals and all this stuff. So it was a very big event that was going on at this time. So I just want to recap, that way the fellow panelists can have some time as well. But in 2018, this is what the hall looks like. This is not the original hall. This used to be a parking lot back in the day. The original building is behind it. But nowadays, after 108 years, this hall is still going strong. And Octavio Barajas and I, we had an event there recently, and we call it what did you call it? The Renaissance, right?
The Renaissance de la Sociedad Juarez.
Right, the Renacimiento. So hopefully this hall can return back to its days, its heyday of being the center for all these parties, all these celebrations, and hopefully you guys stop by and visit this hall.
That's right.
And so just to close out, one of the things that I mentioned in the beginning was that self-help agenda, self-help movement. And a lot of people in lieu of government services knew. Deborah Weber in her book, Dark Sweat, White Gold, argues that the Mexicanos that came here were used to not getting anything in Mexico because the government wasn't helping them, that they came here and they did the same thing. They were not docile. They knew that they had to do it for themselves. Nava and Nunez also knew this. They couldn't wait for the government to help them. They went along doing it themselves. And this kind of ideology is also kind of, you can see embodied in Jess Nieto. He didn't wait for other people to do it. He went and got to do it himself. Right? If you wait, it may not come, but you can guarantee that it might come if you go out and get it. And so that kind of ties in this talk of these guys from 1900 turning to the last century to Jess Nieto from the last century. Right. Thank you.
Well, as he's working on setting that up, I just want to thank you guys for being here and supporting this event. It's really an honor for me to be here and be a part of the conversation. It's really exciting to see all these familiar faces here too. And also, I just want to thank, of course, Professor Rosales and Professor Barajas, and of course, Jack. Are you still here? Great! Yeah. I want to thank you too for the Levin Center making this, being the hosting place. But thanks, Professor Rosales and Barajas, for making this possible. It's really great to be a part of it. And also, like Sully said, really thank you to Jess for making this happen and bringing everybody together. I've known Jess for more of my journalist role more than anything, so it's really exciting to see or hear these different stories of how people have been impacted by them. And also very important to me too, I do want to thank the family of Esther Arende, who's the focus of my presentation. She's a very powerful woman in her own way, and I want to share some of my preliminary research, but I do want to mention, Juliana, are you here? Juliana's her daughter. Tony, Tony, thank you for being here. Marianne, thank you. And Alyssa and Ethan. Yes, yay, thank you for being here. So, I wish Esther would be here, but of course she unfortunately passed away in December. And her birthday's around the corner, actually. But she's her spirit still lives on, and that's really part of my focus here, is really try to capture the essence of who Esther Arende was, because she's a very important part of particularly the United Farm Worker movement. She and that's I titled my topic, Living in the Movement, The Rise of Esther Arende. Because in some ways, we see that with her, Esther in some ways, she kind of grew up in that movement. She evolved, she changed. She started out as a farm worker, and before you know it, she was, a very important leader in that organization. Unfortunately, the history books don't capture her. And so that's why I'm trying to work on this. I'm trying to add to the narrative, because it's very important to share this. Because for me, I was drawn to Esther. I actually met her because I was doing something bigger, wanted to look at the role of women in the United Farm Worker, particularly in the early movement between 1965 and 1975. I love this picture I use of her. It's a very young picture, but I think, it makes me think about, I wonder what she was thinking about, this image. It's so very telling. So just to give you a quick overview of what I want to present, I want to give you kind of an idea of what I'm trying to do with my preliminary research, what I'm hoping to accomplish here. And also I want to spend some time talking about Esther Arende and her involvement in the movement United Farm Workers. I also want to touch on briefly the historiography, which is pretty much what has been said about United Farm Workers in history, what's been the narrative, and how do I see the work I'm doing as a complement or as an addition to a very important topic. And of course, I also want to end talking about, in general, the role of women in United Farm Worker, particularly in the very early part, because I think this is very important to have that conversation. Because between 1965 and 1975, there were some major changes here. We talk about the boycott, we talk about the strikes, we talk about a national boycott, of course, the national boycott movement that Sister Chavez led. But a lot of this would not have been possible without the power or the influence of women. Women in various roles. And I want to talk about that in a minute. So that is kind of the main argument I'm trying to make in the research that I'm doing, is that women such as Esther Arende really contributed to the success of the United Farm Workers in the very beginning. And so we don't, again, one of my challenges is really to try to really bring more of that story to here, because we don't really hear about Esther Arende. We don't really hear about the other women. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to historiography. But really, I tried to, when I first started this project, I really wanted to look at the role of these different groups of women who played a powerful role. Mexicanas, who were the farm workers, right? The Chicanas, who were out here too, and wanted to be a part of the movement in one way or another. And of course, we had liberal white women who were leaving places like New York. We have Peggy McGivern. She was a nurse by profession, and she was an organizer in New York. And she left and she came here to Kern County to be a part of this movement that she was very passionate about. So it was a very multifaceted story here. And so I try to capture that through Esther. And so I really enjoyed that I had the opportunity to talk to her before she passed away. And so I spent a couple of times interviewing her, and I remember calling Juliana, asking her, like, hey, I'd like to do this project, I'd like to interview your mom. And I remember Esther was very hesitant to talk to me at first. Like, who wouldn't be? She was a nosy person, wanted to ask her all these bunch of questions. You know, I'm going to trust you. What's your story here? But over time, she started to let go. So, you know, we met regularly. Talk about the power of memory. You know, that is such an important part of narrative, because one of the reasons that we don't see people like Esther in the history books is because they didn't keep diaries, right? They weren't keeping track of everything. They were making things happen, right? They were in the movement. So we didn't see them because there were no records. And so for her, it's the power of oral history that comes into play, right? And the power of that memory, because I remember meeting with her regularly and asking her over and over things just to make sure we were on point. But man, she had some memory. She did not forget a thing. She paid attention to detail. So, and she was. I mean, she's been a part of the United Farm Workers for like 50 years. She was the longest tenured union staff member. You know, she started out as a farm worker. She went over as an organizer. She was involved in the health clinic. She was involved in the health benefit plan. She was a bookkeeper. She was an administrator. She was also a board member. So she had these various roles. She didn't expect that. She didn't jump into the movement and say, you know, I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to do all this. It was something that evolved organically with her. And she also said it too when I interviewed. She's like, you know, I never really thought I was going to do all these things. But it was always someone pushing her. Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, always challenging her, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And this is something very powerful, especially for someone who had an 8th grade education. For her, she was educated another way, and she learned so much. So she went from that, from those layers that I mentioned there. And of course, like I touched on earlier, she worked in the, you know, eventually, you know, she was one of those who was participated in the strike with her husband, Manuel, right? And he also, you know, he also evolved too. He became part of the security detail for Cesar Chavez. And he traveled all over with him as well. And so with her, I mean, it was very powerful because she was also one of the women who were jailed. You know, I don't know if you guys remember, you know, there was, you know, a significant about 40 people, and then we had like 12 women who were put in jail for participating in, you know, on the picket line. And so this was a very powerful woman. You know, never had any, you know, run-ins with the law, and here she is in jail. And, you know, this is where Helen was there too. And so this is kind of an interesting, compelling point, because even though they were jailed, they were able to bond together. And I think that's very important to have, because with women, I really want to look at moving beyond that domestic role, that feminine role, and taking more of entering the sphere of this activism and moving into another way that was very, very powerful for them and life-changing. So like I mentioned, she was administrator for the Rodrigo Terrones Medical Clinic and the National Chavez Center. I mean, the list was so much. And, but it gets to, I want to get to that historiography briefly. You know, when we think of the history of the UFW, we think of images like this, right? A huge turning point, right? Here we see, you know, the signing, one of the first contracts that we see with the Jamaras that are signing and agreeing with the UFW. Very good. Helps in that strike after 5 years, right? And that's very significant, because it is part of that important narrative that needs to be shared. Unfortunately, that's the issue that we have. When we look at UFW, it's only usually the political or the conflict or more the union or the labor history, you know? And I'm kind of looking at it from another world. I call it gender history because as a historian, of course, women and gender is very important to me. Also local history and Latino, Chicano history as well. Now, I know you probably think, well, what about Dolores? Dolores was part of the conversation. Yeah, she's been a part of that conversation. That's very important. But she's probably the only woman, really, that's been highlighted. And usually when we see about the narrative of the UFW, it's usually one or the other. Cesar Chavez, or it's a book on Cesar Chavez, it's a book on Dolores Huerta. We don't really see more of a kind of a combination. But again, it's about adding that other narrative. It's very important to have. And so, I like this image that I shared here, because again, it's like figuring out, well, how do you do that? What sources can you get? And like I said, it's the power of oral history. It's the power of looking for other sources. Images are very compelling. All the images that I'm sharing here were graciously shared with me from Esther. And so I've been collecting these images, and her family's been gracious enough to stay in touch with me. And, you know, because I do want to write something here. I do, whether it's a book or whether it's an article, her story needs to be shared. Just like many others that I see within the movement have to be shared. And going back to this headline, I really enjoy this because it says a woman's place is on the picket line. This was actually, I can't take credit for this headline. This was actually shared in Macliado, which was the farm worker newspaper. It's kind of like the underground paper. It wasn't mainstream. So the traditional mainstream stuff, they were too busy focusing on the fights, focusing on the protests, focusing on the rest. But here we had in Macliado, which was really focusing on very big, the heart of the issues that were really personal and dear to the farm workers. And so we also see them challenging women to get out of the, telling them to take a more of an active role. And so stepping away from that traditional sphere, where not only that, here you see the image of during the hot day, the wife pickets patiently, but not quietly. They really try to capture her as a very powerful woman. And in the article, they talk about how she's doing multiple things. She's at home, she's early in the morning, she's cooking, getting things ready, and then she's like letting go of her femininity by putting on baggy clothes and a baggy shirt because, she has to protect herself from the sun and from the pesticides. And so we see a very big difference for her changing into a different role. Or we also see her on the picket line, challenging things. And that's kind of what I think of like a restaurant, like all these different ways in which she stepped in. So really that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my research is looking at these different layers of involvement that women are capturing here. Not only do we see the traditional campesina story, the Buenquistas, but also the organizers, the leaders, the organizadoras, the líderes. I don't know why my R is not rolling there. But we see, here she is again, Esther Hernandez. This is in 1974. She's with Jeannie Enriquez, and of course they were trying to, of course, pressure a grower to agree to a union contract. Now, I like this image as well. This is with Chris Sanchez. He was kind of like the unofficial photographer, but he also ran the hiring hall, right? And so there she is again, Esther, and here's with Peggy McGivern. And again, Peggy's the one I mentioned earlier. Again, a nurse by profession, passionate about organizing, coming here, get paid like maybe $5 a week, having to share housing. But in Macliado did interview her too, and she talked about her passion too. She felt like, she kind of based on her philosophy that she needed to be part of the community, not to be afraid to be a stranger, and to being part of a change. And so we see Patty McGivern here. These two, of course, had a good relationship. They were organizers, but they were also active in the clinic as well. And so here are multiple faces and layers that we see at the Rodriguez Terrones Memorial Health Clinic, which Esther Hernandez was involved in. Of course, Peggy McGivern is not listed here. There's a number of these women that I would really try to figure out and help identify who have all had a role. And of course, you see men as well taking part in this, in the clinic as well. And like I said, it wasn't, the pay wasn't great, but there was a deeper calling for them. That was kind of that went beyond that. And of course, talking about líderes, it's very important also to see how Esther kind of found her way. She actually found her way because here it wasn't where she, again, like I mentioned, she wasn't trying to say, hey, I'm going to be in this position. It was really like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, kind of like, oh, great, you're getting, how about this? And it kind of reminded me when I heard Paul Chavez share that story also at the field event recently, in which she won an award, the Cesar Chavez Si Se Puede award. And recently, Paul was talking about his dad, and he was saying how my dad kind of like, he would tell me to try this, and then I tried this, and I wanted to be a printer, or he'd tell me to try this, and then I wanted to be an office administrator, and try this. And so he was trying all these different things. And it was so interesting because, Cesar Chavez was doing that, and he also did it with Esther. He was trying to get Esther to try to do different things. And so we see that it wasn't that they were, Cesar Chavez or Dolores wasn't discouraging the role of women to get involved. It was just, this was something very new. This was traditionally a very male, there was a little bit of machismo that took place, not from Cesar, but, in talking to Esther and Dolores Huerta, there was some little bit of some men who weren't comfortable with the idea of women taking leadership roles. One woman had her husband coming to the meetings with her all the time just to make sure that, nothing else was going on, and she was actually in the meeting. And so we see that, and so here she is with Cesar Chavez. She was a very important board member at one point. We see most of the leadership here. We see Esther right here. And Dolores is not pictured in here, but I did also spend some time talking to Dolores too, and wanting to have an understanding of what she thought when it came to Esther and when it came to him and thinking about involving women. And one of the things Dolores told me, which I thought was very important, is that she said, one thing about Cesar, he was really good at putting women in power and leadership positions. He always said women were the best negotiators. They do the work. So, and you know, it's very powerful because, you know, there were situations in where she saw people who had so much potential and she was trying to bring them in. She saw Esther, and that was her story. She was trying to bring her in, and Esther did. She did. Esther was known as the walking encyclopedia. Even when Cesar Chavez passed away, she stayed on. She didn't retire until like 4 years ago. She had been on that whole point. She worked with Arturo Rodriguez as well. And so, and she was a walking encyclopedia. I mean, if you spend time with her, you would know what I'm talking about. And so the last thing I wanted to issue or share with you is the work is still not done. It's still a work in progress. And I'm still meeting with the family and hoping to have something great to produce. But I also want to look into this area, the issue of family, and the issue of children. And how did children play a role? How were they impacted? Because Juliana grew up in the movement. You know, she was out there as a baby. Her mom was carrying her everywhere. And then, of course, she was out there holding the picket signs herself. So how did that impact the women who grew up in that, or the men, or the boys who grew up in that movement? You know, here's a picture of Juliana with her mom. And I think this is also a very important narrative. And for me, as someone who really cares about gender, about women, this is something I think that does a better job in really broadening that conversation and giving a broader context to the story of the UW, but also tribute to Esther Lundy.
Okay, those of you that remain, thank you. I always get the last because I talk too much. Very proud of that. Thank you for staying. I want to acknowledge, first of all, thank Oliver Rosales and Octavio Barajas for inviting me here. It's a great honor to do this for Jess Nieto, who was a personal friend and a comrade in the struggle. But before I proceed, I want to acknowledge the presence of the students from Cal State that are today's at the very vanguard of fighting for immigrant rights, the group called UNIR, United Now for Immigrant Rights. Can you please stand up? Professor David Arrieta, who is not only the current faculty advisor of UNIR, but he is an alumni of Jess Nieto's Chicano Leadership and Educational Program. And now he's passing on the baton to this young people who are kicking butt at Cal State and changing things. And so I'm very proud they're here representing Cal State. Thank you for coming. How do you move this forward? I click here?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. Is there a way to turn this light off?
Yeah.
Over here?
Yeah.
I want to turn this light off because the pictures are very good. No, this guy. That, there, this guy.
It's the big switch. The one next to it. Keep going. Oh.
There we go. Now the other one. You have the other one off.
Leave both those on, and it's a big switch down.
There. So, because the pictures are, some of them are historical, they're a little grainy. It's worth turning off the light.
I'm going to talk about Jess Nieto and his unique brand of leadership in this community in particular. I've known people like Jess Nieto all my life, but in Bakersfield, I've only known one, and that was Jess Nieto. He was the ultimate internationalist, the ultimate citizen of the world. And most of the folks here in the first panel render homage to Jess Nieto in his early period after he got his PhD and was recruited to come and teach the very first Chicano studies. Where did he get all these ideas? Where did he get all the knowledge to develop the curriculum? Where did he get all the vision of what Chicano studies should be? Well, he got it in Mexico. He actually went to Mexico and started a program called Program Mexica. Program Mexica in the 1970s, maybe Dwayne might remember, sent delegations of Bakersfield students to go and learn Aztec history and anthropology and archaeology and Mexican Republican history and the history of the Mexican Revolution. All that he arranged from Bakersfield upon coming to Bakersfield College. So he used the institution as a springboard to then develop a brand new program called Proyecto Mexica with the Mexican government, the Secretaría de Educación Pública, and who knows how many other institutions. He was very, very good at that. And he developed a program that allowed not just to send delegations of BC students to Mexico to study, but come back with curriculum, come back with programmatic ideas of what to do. This is the bridge of someone who comes from the ancestral California families of California. His family, the Nietos, were the people that inherited one of the great misiones down where today is Long Beach, inherited the Nieto ranch that was the size of present-day Long Beach. He comes from the earliest Mexicanos. He comes from the earliest Californians. And he grew up and got a PhD in anthropology and comes to BC. And then he goes to Mexico and starts the Proyecto Mexica. This is extraordinary because what he did is he created his own bridge to become an internationalist, being the most rooted Chicano I have ever met in my life. I have never met someone that goes back that much. Todos nosotros llegamos apenitas recientemente. You know, some of us have family that came to the Mexican Revolution. His family came before the independence of Mexico, when this was California, part of New Spain, with the secularization of the missions. That's how far back he comes from, and he does the leap from being highly localized, highly rooted Californian to becoming a global citizen. And it all started with the Proyecto Mexica, which I didn't include in the presentation because I thought the earlier panels were going to cover it since it belongs to the 1970s. I pick up the story from the 1980s on. So I'm going to go a little fast. There's a video at some point in the presentation that I'm going to postpone until the end, which is my homage to him. Okay? So here we go. This is what he started to do. I'm going to jump over the BC period and the period of Chicano studies and Chicano ethnic pride and the whole insurrection of Mexican Americans in the United States. I'm going to jump all back. Because in the 1980s, it became very obvious in the United States that the most salient issue overtaking the issue of ethnicity and the rights of ethnic groups in America was the issue of immigration. And he was a surfer of history. He was in history. He did not create history, but when he saw history happening, he jumped and joined it and made a contribution. And so in the 80s, it became the most raging issue of our times, and it continues to be the most raging issue of our times, the issue of immigration, as you know, which led to the 1986 amnesty law. And when that happened, it created new space for immigrants to actually start doing fantastic things, like, for instance, getting papers. And one of the earliest people that got involved in that project was none other than our Jess Nieto. Our anthropology PhD guy turned into a paper arranger for immigrants. He started a whole chain of clinics called One Stop Immigration Services, and he is singly responsible for having created a whole enterprise in Kern County that led to over 10,000 immigrants becoming either green card holders or citizens. And that was just Nieto just getting into that period of history. That's how he got his feet wet on the issue, by starting to serve the immigrants directly. So not only was he doing things at BC, he was doing things in the whole county for immigrants, okay? And of course, most of the immigrants were Mexican immigrants. And so the fact that he himself had created Proyecto Mexica and that he came from the early Californians was perfect. So we call those kinds of people organic intellectuals. You know what they are? They're real thinkers, but they are practical thinkers in history, working with the people as the people emancipate itself. History is made by people, but it always needs organic intellectuals like Jess Nieto. And so he was certainly understanding his moment in history and contributing to it. Now, I want to point out, there's Dianne Feinstein in that picture as she was running for senator. And right here on the, well, I don't know if this thing has a laser, but on the left is a very young Kevin De Leon, who is now running against Dianne Feinstein for the Senate. And I also want to point out that that young lady in front, dressed in white, is my wife, who is present right here, and was a staff member of Jess Nieto. And her sister is right next to her. So you see, I have family relations with Jess Nieto's operations. I guess that got me hooked. All right.
He does have a clicker.
No, I want the laser.
Yeah.
How do you point the laser?
The middle one.
Ah, the middle button. Okay. Well, let's try it. Okay, there we go. I think you recognize who the barbudo is there. By the way, tomorrow, for the first time in 59 years, there's going to be a president of Cuba, not a Castro, not Raul or Fidel, who Jess had great respect for because they were the leaders of a real social revolution. They themselves were organic intellectuals of the Cuban people. The Cuban people made its own revolution, but they needed the Castros. The Mexican people made the Mexican Revolution, but they needed Zapata. And if you want to talk about intellectuals, they needed the brothers Flores Magón, who were exiled in California. So it's all connected, okay? So here is his next step. After he's done with the immigration thing, he understands there's also a raging war of counterinsurgency being launched by the Reagan administration against the peoples of Central America, most specifically against the peoples of El Salvador, but also Guatemala and Nicaragua. And he joins that moment of history to make a contribution. And one of the things that happened during this ferocious period of the late 80s, where there was a bloodbath, especially in El Salvador, is that certain countries in Latin America finally, for the first time since who knows how long ago, stood up to the United States and forged a thing called the Contadora proposal. The Contadora group had several countries proposing a peace path, a path towards peace in Central America. And Jess Nieto from Bakersfield organizes with other Chicanos right there, and they go, also intellectuals. Some of them go back to the walkouts, and they go to travel to Central America, and they visit El Salvador, and Guatemala, and Nicaragua, and Mexico, and then they go to Cuba, and they interviewed Fidel Castro. And when they come back, they make this scathing report denouncing the bloodbath sponsored by our tax money in El Salvador. He contributed to preventing Ronald Reagan from sending Marines to El Salvador. He contributed to the peace of El Salvador by supporting the Contadora process. He was an internationalist solidarity activist. And so that's what he did in the late 80s, all right? Then, because of these connections in Cuba, he kept going for the rest of the time and began to organize tours of Cuba, delegations of Cuba, participating in conferences in Cuba. He led several delegations from Bakersfield, and there's some pictures there. In 1999, 2000, 2001, 2007, despite the fact that in this period there was a fierce embargo as you know, which continues to this day, Obama tried to loosen it up, and we're back in the same old situation. Well, he was violating the embargo. He kept taking mostly Latinos to Cuba to make sure that we participate in the solidarity with that country. This is remarkable because none of you ever mentioned what Jess Nieto was doing outside the United States. But that's what caught my attention. Because all my life I've been doing things about outside of the United States, and I finally found another weird person like me. And so that I became instantly attracted to him. All right. So, well, Jess Nieto was always chasing around the most interesting stories in the world. So the next thing he does, and this is in the 1990s, he, of course, understands the implications, the strategic implications of the rapprochement with China. And so he begins a long-lasting, a very long-term relationship with Chinese academies, Chinese merchants, Chinese intellectuals, Chinese cultural artists. He brought delegations of painters. He organized a wonderful artistic display in the Bakersfield Art Museum. He does all this stuff. And I said, Jess, how do you manage to go to Cuba and then to El Salvador and then to China? He said, it's very easy. You actually ask if you can send a delegation, and you would be surprised how many people actually love us, especially us Chicanos. I said, yeah, you're right. Okay. So there he is. He said he made several trips, and many Chinese delegations came to Bakersfield. I don't know if you bumped into any of them. One project I was personally involved with him is he then tried to do the same thing with Venezuela. Venezuela is demonized by our media. Venezuela is demonized in the minds of the policymakers of this country, in the media, constantly. Venezuela made a great contribution in the 2000s, which is it resurrected Bolivar's dream of a unified, integrated, united Latin America. Now, it had all kinds of problems, but the Bolivarian dream is something that was resurrected in Venezuela under the leadership of Hugo Chavez. When that happened, immediately our organic intellectual got the whiff of it. And so he immediately began to contact, and I got involved in it, and we invited diplomats and academics to come to Bakersfield, and I volunteered to set up a fantastic presentation in Bakersfield, in Cal State, which was then sabotaged by none other than Hillary Clinton, who denied a visa to the academic coming to Cal State. That's why I didn't vote for Hillary. I would not vote for Hillary if you dragged me with chains. No, I didn't let, you let Trump win. I didn't let Trump, don't blame me por andar con esa mujer poniendo Bernie first. Bernie should have done. All right. I want to just say that Jess Nieto was completely in agreement with me on that. All right, and that I can bring slides about. All right. So, but let's get back to this. So look at the ingenious idea he had. His idea, he was always very savvy with money. His idea was, why don't Hugo Chavez, who has all the oil in the world, create a trust fund out of the sale of petroleum to the United States, which was never interrupted, and create, a $10 million fund so that we can send Chicano kids to Venezuela, and Venezuelans can come here to Bakersfield. And it was going to happen because Chavez was sponsoring things like that. And it would have happened, but it was blocked by the Obama administration. And we should know that there is no difference in foreign policy between those two with regards to Hugo Chavez. All right. Now, this is where I really got to know Jess, and this is where I really worked together with him. Very proud of that. And when I say him, I don't want to create the great man theory of history. I have here Bernice Bonilla, who was involved, and Dwayne Goff, who was my commander, and we had a number of veteranos, people that had cut their teeth in the Chicano movement, people that had cut their teeth in opening up Bakersfield from the apartheid of the 60s. All the people that have contributed greatly to making Bakersfield a multicultural society. All these people got involved in immigrant marches, in the immigrant movement from 2006 on. When I mention Jess, it's because he contributed a singular contribution to this marches, which is actually shown in the video, which I brought, okay? It shows you how much he did contribute to making it happen. And it's from the clips of all the news. So that we're gonna see. But the next thing he jumps into history, the next surfing board he grabs, and he surfs right into the halls of history, is the great historic marches of the immigrants, which beat every other march ever in the history of the United States, before, during, and after. Nothing compares to the 5 million marchers of 2006. No le llega a nadie. And we had two such rallies in Bakersfield, one April 10th and the other one on May 1st, May Day. The April 10th was a surprise to the organizers. We did not expect maybe more than 2,000 to 3,000 people.
We had the mayor marched with us.
No, that's on the
Was
second
that the second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that one, nobody wanted to come even close to us. This one, the first one was, not even the Hispanics wanted to come close to us, okay? It took the second one to finally get some Hispanics to join us. But this march had 15,000 people. There had never been a Latino Chicano march in Bakersfield anywhere remotely close to that, not even during the UFW's heyday. This was remarkable, and the most amazing, remarkable fact was the people marching were the immigrants. This was a family immigrant march. This was not just students. This was not movement heavies. This was not sympathizers and allies. This was the immigrants themselves that marched, which changed history forever in the history of the United States. First time ever that immigrants, as immigrants, act on the stage of history. And Jess was there to contribute. And that is what made me, from that moment on, consider him my closest brother here in Bakersfield. He's right here. That little guy here with a little white hat.
Oh, yeah.
That's him, all right? Marching in the very front, 15,000. In May Day, Bernice was mentioning May Day, he was the person. I went with him, because I don't know anybody in Bakersfield like he does. So he went to see Mayor Harvey Hall. And I was amazed at the way that he convinced them to join the front of the second march. The second march actually was headed towards Beach Park, and then we had for the rest of the day something like, well, actually no, this is not yet the Harvey March. That was in 2013. I'm very sorry. This is the second march in May Day in 2006. 35,000 people went to Beach Park, and they went marching to the offices of Bill Thomas. All right. So I say there's a video, so we're gonna see a video at the end. This is the one that Mayor Harvey Hall led, and that's him right here. That's him right here, and that's him right there. And it was about 6,000-7,000 people that came to that march, 2013. So again, Jess Nieto was at the center of this mobilizations the second time around too. He was instrumental in arranging meetings with Kevin McCarthy or getting the mayor to support the march, etc. So again, he was very involved in the immigrant rights movement, and very few Chicano veteranos like Dwayne, like Bernice, like me, very few were involved. And Jess, it was really a whole new generation. So our work, our efforts, our students were leading this stuff. This was the greatest satisfaction we had. So he kept putting pressure on Kevin McCarthy. We had endless numbers of rallies and pickets. That's him right here. That's him right here. These are all very important people in the movement for immigrant rights. I'm sorry, Bernice. I don't know where I can find you there, but you're there somewhere.
She's probably taking the picture.
And then, to the very last day, he kept himself very engaged lobbying for immigration reform. This is a meeting just before going to see Kevin McCarthy, and he was going to tongue lash the guy. Here's him with Ray Gonzalez, all the way to the end. He was involved in this ethnic curriculum development in the LA area, in Long Beach area, in all these new high school ethnic courses. He was involved with Ray Gonzalez in that issue. Even though you can see they're quite along in years, he didn't miss going to those things, even though he was involved with China and all the rest. And he passed away working. He passed away working. You know, he was ill for a long time, but he worked all the way to the end out of his heritage for America, for the people. So one of the last things, I think this is the last thing I'm going to mention, and Selena is here, and David is here. These are the kids that he mentored later in 2005 and 2006 when he founded the Chicano Latino Scholastic and Leadership Academy. And he had campuses like Long Beach and Santa Barbara operating to teach the classes, to take the students, to get them out of Bakersfield, to take them out of Fraser Park and stuff. He did that, and here they are. You can see them here, and some of them are here in the audience. So he was an internationalist. He was a person in history. He was surfing each stage of his life's great moments. He never quit. And for that, Bakersfield College, this wonderful campus of yours, recognized him in November 2015, and they did a whole thing for him. They, as you can see, they honor him for his pioneer work in Chicano studies and his lifelong service to our beloved community. When he passed away and they did a funeral memorial service, most people only spoke of this period. Most people, in fact, except for the last remarks by Ray Gonzalez, most people at the funeral only spoke of this era, of the era in which he contributed so much for our Chicano students and Chicano programs here at BC, as if he had not kept going doing all this other stuff. And I was very puzzled, so I brought it to the attention of Oliver, and he said, well, let's do a conference. So here we are. We're paying our due respects to somebody that never quit and changed gears as history changed gears. I'm very proud of having worked with him. And so I say, compañero Jess Nieto, presente. That's how I say when I talk about him. He's always present. And to regale you of the tribute I made for him. Let's see. How do you make it big?
Top right corner, middle button.
Is it on?
I don't know how long though. Is it on?
Thousands of students ditch class and hit the streets in protest of proposed immigration policies. The news starts now.
This is all about the marches.
Road 29, behind witness intersection. Why? 29, behind witness intersection 11. Starts right now.
Kern County erupts in protest about immigration reform. Now a coalition wants to educate residents about this complicated issue. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Kurt Rivera.
And I'm Linda Halligan. As the hot-button issue of immigration reform dominates the country, a local group of Kern County residents is about to undertake a role of educating the community about the volatile topic that inflames passionate debate. 29 Eyewitness News reporter Jose Gaspar joins us from the newsroom with more on how this coalition plans on doing that. Jose?
Well, Linda, as we've seen here in Kern County today, immigration reform and all of its underlying issues bring out passionate views among many people. Now a coalition of several different groups here in Bakersfield is about to undertake a task in trying to educate the community about this complex issue.
With Congress still debating what to do about immigration reform, some worry that it will adopt the most punitive measures against undocumented workers.
Simplistic answers won't work on this very complex issue. And so we want a humane, comprehensive
piece of legislation that involves immigration that's going to be sympathetic to the needs of our community, the economy, and our citizens.
Meeting at St. Francis Church, a diverse group of labor advocates, civic organizations, professionals, religious groups, for obvious reasons. For example, the Catholic Church is among the strongest supporters of illegal immigrants and is adamantly opposed to a House bill that would sanction churches and others who help the undocumented. And local Spanish language media is also involved.
Well, I think there has to be commitment. I haven't seen any commitment besides Radio Campesina. I haven't seen any other either radio or TV Spanish stations getting involved in committing to the cause. And I mean, these people listen to us and they watch our television shows and they give us the ratings that we have. So I think it's time for us to pay back.
As a coalition, the group says it will hold community and educational events to let people know about the complexities of an issue that go beyond the sound bites on television.
What is going on now, is what is new, is that this sort of coalition reflects the immigrant population, which are multi-ethnic, and we expect to have a voice in the dialogue.
The coalition plans to have its first event on April 10th at Jess Park. That will take place on Monday when high school students will be out of school on their spring break. I would usually will say a start. Linda, now back to you.
All right, thanks, Jose.
All right, thank you, Spencer. The cost to our entire country could be severe. Many local farmers fear losing their workforce over immigration reform, but others say it's not fair and all immigrants should go through the proper channels. 17's Kiyoshi Tomono tonight takes a look at how the proposed immigration reforms could affect our community.
Is it art imitating life or the other way around? Just 2 weeks ago, this movie about a 1968 student walkout in Los Angeles hit the silver screen at the Fox Theater. About 1,500 students and parents showed up to watch. Today, there was this.
It's been a film that has had tremendous impact, I think, because the students and their families have been talking about it because they saw that it gave them a sense of empowerment.
The movie Walkout chronicles the more than 10,000 Mexican-American students who walked out of high schools in East Los Angeles in 1968 to protest the way the school system handled their education. Nieto says local kids may be equally frustrated.
Many of them didn't know the details, but they understood what it means for a lot of their parents, a lot of their relatives, a lot of their friends who maybe are not here documented.
Local farmers are perhaps just as concerned, but for a different reason.
The illegal immigrants play a huge role in our economy here in Kern County, especially in the agricultural sector. They provide 99% of our labor force.
Criminalizing undocumented workers could create a ripple effect across the state.
Agriculture would be devastated by that.
The streets of Bakersfield here at home were transformed into a sea of students yesterday as thousands of high schoolers staged a walkout to protest immigration reform. Now, an email circulating that is asking those students to do it again. We're live this morning at Bakersfield High School with more on what that email has to say. Good morning, Clint.
Good morning, Kiyoshi. Bakersfield High School students linked up with other students from about a dozen schools around Kern County yesterday. They started walking around 8 yesterday morning, and they ended up in front of Superior Court at the Liberty Bell, where they took part in a protest that lasted for a couple, 2 or 3 hours there. You can see some pictures from it yesterday. They were there for, as I said, about 2 or 3 hours, and there were about, BPD estimates, 4,000 of them there. These are kids from VHS, North, East, South, Golden Valley, Foothill, West, Vista, and Centennial. Now, they heard about it. We talked with them. They said through MySpace and text messages and emails, and also through calling each other on the phone. Now, yesterday evening, another email went out, and 17 News has obtained a copy of it. I can read you just a piece of it. It says, now we're changing the rules every day this week. Please walk out of school. All pro-immigrant students, please walk out of school. Don't be afraid. We're doing it over and over every day this week. We're going to stop HR 4377, and we're going to make history. Back live out here at Bakersfield High School. Yesterday, 17 News talked with authorities with the Kern High School District. They said that they're going to be dealing with truancy harshly, and we talked with the district attorney's office, and some of these students too, these habitual class cutters, are going to be dealt with through the legal system too. So not a good idea to walk out today. The Kern High School District discouraging it, as well as law enforcement. Yesterday there were riot police down at the, there were police and riot police standing by at the Liberty Bell in case things got out of hand. They didn't, but of course no one encouraged to walk out of school today. Reporting live from VHS, Clint Olivier, 17 News.
All right, thanks, Clint. 17 newsmakers. And the Senate debate on border security and immigration continues today on Capitol Hill. In fact, it's going on right now in Washington, D.C.
That's right, Danielle, with some perspective on the legislation, which of course is stirring up a lot of controversy. We're joined by Jess Nieto of the Heritage of America Foundation and Cultural Foundation, and Jim Lopez, chairman of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Jess, let's start with you. You were one of the actors of the movie that showed Lockout, that was showed about 2 weeks ago at the Fox Theater, talking about the 1968 East Los Angeles lockout of some students there protesting education. Were you proud of the students that walked out yesterday from your classrooms?
I think there was a great deal of pride in the whole community because it demonstrated that these students were expressing a sense of empowerment and a sense of frustration and anger with the craziness of the legislation that has been discussed in Washington. And so I think that there was some great a deal of pride in their group.
News at 6.
Chanting for change, thousands of people hitting the pavement to march in protest of immigration reform. Good evening. Thanks for watching News at 6. Let's get Jim Night off tonight. Today's immigration protests in our newscast.
They marched by the thousands, hoping to get your attention and that of lawmakers at the nation's capital. Bakersfield police say 7,000 to 10,000 people showed up for today's march called the National Day of Action on Immigration Rights. 17 t-shirts with their and Joyce's flyers from Central Bakersfield with more t-shirts.
My again, the march may be over, but demonstrators say the message is clear. They're saying no to any law that would make undocumented immigrants criminals, and yes to fair, what they call fair immigration laws. Immigration reform may be at a standstill at the nation's capital, but here at home, protesters moved ahead by the thousands.
We are all here in this country. It's a free country, and everybody should be able to be here and send a message
I knew
to
you
the
were coming.
administration that we want changes in immigration.
The march started at Johnstone Park, moving to the streets of downtown, halting traffic and causing many to take notice.
I'm here to support the Senate bill and to oppose the House of Representatives bill, because it should be have fair treatment of all the immigrants.
Some even traveled from abroad to be a part of what many are calling an historic day for Latinos across the country.
And here for the march
From old to young, some Mexican natives, others born in the U.S., many of today's march share one message.
Marchers are chanting, "Si se puede," yes, we can. They say a community united will never be defeated.
At the center of the immigration
There
debate,
he is.
there's an old House bill that pushes to label all illegal immigrants and those helping them criminals.
I work with immigrants. I teach them English. They're not criminals. They deserve a break.
Thousands here at home and millions across the country marched peacefully today. Protests aimed at putting pressure on politicians.
We want them to work hard to come to a amicable agreement. Amnesty for the people that are already here because they have children that are already born here, to expand, make it bigger for the quotas coming in so that we won't have this problem.
The march was organized by the Kern Coalition for Immigrants' Rights, which includes various groups, including Heritage of America Cultural and Educational Foundation and the Dolores Huerta Foundation. We're live in Central Bakersfield. Tisha Lewis, 17 News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Kurt Rivera.
And I'm Linda Halligan. Thousands packed Beach Park in Bakersfield as a part of a National Day of Action. The boycott called on immigrants to take the day off from work, from school, and to not not spend any money as a way to show their significance in the community. 29 Eyewitness News reporter Cindy Schuin spent the day and part of this evening at Beach Park and joins us now with the latest. Cindy?
Linda, today's rally was the second mass rally in Bakersfield in the last 3 weeks, one of many taking place across the country. Organizers estimate a total of 25,000 people at the park throughout the day and evening as they called for a just and humane immigration bill now pending in Congress. Young and old, demonstrators dressed in white and waving both Mexican and American flags. They filled Beach Park making noise about immigration reform.
We're not criminals. We're just asking to give us some justice.
Erica Moran was one of many immigrants who spent the day supporting the cause, particularly upset about one bill that would make anyone in the country illegally a felon. That sentiment shared by all who missed work and school, at one point making it a human billboard, stretching from 24th Street and coming around Oak Street all the way down to 19th Street as drivers went by honking support. From Beach Park, supporters marched to Congressman Bill Thomas's office for a candlelight vigil. Jesse Ibarra, one of the organizers of the rally, says he's impressed by the thousands who took the day off.
The numbers that were amazing more than anything was we counted about 300 businesses that closed today. They closed their doors. And that just showed the power of the people today, of unity, coming together as a community.
With candles blazing, supporters say the vigil represents what they hope is a peaceful mobilization, as well as a time to remember all who died crossing the borders in search of a better life. And while many question what rallies like this will accomplish, protesters like Sonia Miranda say the power will be felt this coming election.
People are going to want to vote for. I mean, I didn't care about voting, and now I do.
No arrests were made today, but Bakersfield police say there were some tense moments at one point when some marchers wanted to march on streets that had not been okayed by police. But in all, police tell us the rally was mostly peaceful. Kurt, back to you.
Yeah, he kept going. He never stopped. The only reason it stops in 14 is because we haven't had marches since 2014. And the reason we don't have marches since 2014 is because we're sitting on our butts. Jess was always ready. But the community doesn't want to stand up. And we got Trump. And we're still sitting on our butts. So I agree. We got to deal with that. So thank you so much.
To thank the panelists for this wonderful discussion, showcase of research. It's very illuminating, you know, underlining the importance of the Chicano studies related work that's presented. It's something that we see that there's many voids in knowledge that need to be filled, and much education that was briefed in just a short amount of time. And there's so much more that each one of them can unpack with the work that they've discussed in such a short period of time. One thing we're going to do is, in the interest of time, we're falling behind schedule, and we're going to have to postpone Q&A, but you want to make a quick comment?
That's why it's so important to see the disgrace of the disbandment of the Chicano Cultural Center and the Black Students Union.
And we also need to continue doing that work as well, right? To continue doing that work and vocalizing that interest, right? Because if there's no vocalization of that interest, I think it was stated from the beginning, how else is anything going to be done, you know, if there's no effort put forth? So that's another thing to continue that. Continue demonstrating that interest, vocalizing that interest, and making sure the right people understand and hear that interest, and that we want more things like this. There's a very dynamic energy in the room. I think everyone can really feel it. History, you know, being spoken, being lived at this conference right now. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to do a brief intermission. We're going to have a break until we're postponing the next session. It was scheduled to start at 6:30. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start it actually at 6:45. And one thing I'm going to ask is that we're going to have to vacate the facility for that brief period of time. And
I'll be here.
Yeah. So Oliver will be here in the facility. We have a private dinner for the participants that have been here throughout the day, working and stuff, and we're gonna ask them to actually step outside and greet them, and also our student volunteers who also helped out, Juan Gonzalez, and also Gloria Miller, who were also included with that. We're gonna step out real quick and then return and get started at 6:45.